daughter does. My daughter had seen one of your posts the other day, and she really does adore your profile pic.
Yes. Which one?
This
They're
one.
all fantastic.
This one with the glasses, with the little hands, and
oh yeah, that's comic relief. That's for comic relief. Those glasses.
Yeah. I will say
fantastic.
As far as the our little corner of the internet, I think you are her favorite theist. She sort of will comment on. I mean, she doesn't read, so I don't know if she necessarily would side with you on the positions you post, but she does like your profile pics and some of the pictures that you share. So
that's progress.
Yeah. Well, I've mentioned in other Hangouts, I've had to remember to, if I ever listen to a Hangout, I have to wear headphones because my kids, for a little more than a year now, have been picking up things, and they've now come to the unfortunate conclusion that there is no God. When I've asked them to justify that stance, because I say, you don't know where stuff came from, you don't know. They'll say, well, because G-Man believes in God, and he's really, really rude.
That's the best reason to be an atheist in the whole world. If G-Man believes it, it's not true.
I said, do you not know what a genetic fallacy is? She says no.
It's funny. Like my wife's pretty like apathetic to like the whole discussion. She just doesn't care. But it's the same thing. Like I'd be listening to videos and stuff, and she recognizes it now. She's like, "Is that G-Man?" I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Oh, I can never be a Christian because of him." And I was like, "Yeah, I get you. I feel that."
There's a very, very real effect there. We might talk about that a little bit too, just at the start here. So welcome to the audience, and we're going to talk a little bit about morality and moral realism, and the terms objective and subjective. Maybe I don't want to jump into it right away, in part because it is what many of us call Easter weekend. Why don't we? I think it would be fair and appropriate to take a little pause. I'm going to ask. Scotsman Matt, we're joined so far by Scotsman Matt and by Sock Account. I've sent a link to a few other people. I hope they want to come join and talk about recent events. But first, Matt, you had some. We all, as we met, I think we were the three of the kindest gentlemen in the whole discussion, and we wished each other Happy Easter, and you rebuffed it. So, to give us a few words about what this weekend is about, and sort of historically what it means and what it's come to mean for us.
I mean, it's Resurrection Sunday.
All right, well, tell us about it.
That's it. Jesus was resurrected. Well, this is the day we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus from the dead to redeem humanity from their sins, so that we can all go to be reconciled with God and live eternally in heaven rather than in hell.
Can we all do that? You said we can, so we can all do that. Is that?
Yeah. It depends how you mean all. Like, if you're a Calvinist, then all would be limited to the elect. If you're not a Calvinist, then everyone has that opportunity to avail themselves of that sacrifice and avoid hell. Not everyone will, but everyone has the opportunity.
Well, that's exactly why I asked. I did about 2 weeks ago hear a 45-minute long discussion contained within one very long hangout, but about a 45-minute discussion on what's meant by the word all.
Yeah, there's a whole book written on it. I have a really old book, and it's all about the word all. It's written by a Calvinist trying to explain the all in the Bible. Yeah.
Well, are you going to heaven? Is that your plan?
Am I going to what?
To heaven.
Well, I don't know. That's up to God. He's the man.
You don't know for
it's
sure.
Like going to sometimes I go out at the weekend and I go to a bar. But whether I get in, it's up to the bouncers.
Oh, I thought you were going to say some of the stuff that you do at the bar might.
No. It's up to the bouncers at the door. They might say you've had too much, you're too old, I don't like your glasses. Who knows? It's up to the bouncers.
Your name's not on the list.
Exactly.
That's the list.
But I'm with them. I'm with those girls over there. Nah. You ain't coming in, son.
Come on, it's cold out there. I got my nice dress on.
I'm with those scantily clad girls over there. You got to let me in.
Yeah, if we haven't worked that way. My mind to sinful thoughts on Resurrection Sunday.
Yeah, well, I was afraid you were saying that it depends what you did do with your weekends, because I was going to blurt out about works-based salvations. Just on a side note, I'm sure we'll get into this at some point today, but I do find it interesting that the evangelicals plant a flag in the idea that they really have cornered the market on morality. They're the only ones who act morally. Certainly the atheists just have no moral compass. You can't possibly have a moral framework. You can't engage in moral reasoning because you're an atheist. And I find it an interesting claim, because their own view, as they stated, I'm not saying this is the biblical view, I'm saying this is what we hear from the radical evangelicals, the one-man ministries, is that works-based salvation, gasp, oh no, there's works-based, your works mean nothing, your rags, blah, filthy rags. And they don't seem to realize the position that they're arguing for is that the universe is created and managed by a very despotic bouncer that well, some of them are Calvinists and some of them aren't, but the point is, you're in reading John 3:16 and 17, there's just a choice point there. If you believed, you're going for heaven for eternity, and if you didn't believe, then off you go, eternal torment. And it's a strange position, because then, if I were to pick up what I misunderstood you were saying about going to the bar on the weekend, they could do whatever they want. They can go to gay bars and have random sex in bathrooms and do whatever they want because they believed. And I know they have a response to that, but it is, how do they claim that they have they claim they own accountability, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think that's maybe is it Matt Slick's view? But I mean, it depends why you think one saved, always saved. So. But one saved, always saved is kind of, I don't hold to that. Like, it does give a license to.
Actually,
quick sound check. There's a chance it's going to be abysmal.
You sound not too bad. Not too bad. A little bit echoey, but we can hear what you're saying. So, how you doing, Jake?
Very good.
All right. I have one more question for Matt, and we'll roll into this. Is it, Matt? Had you seen the discussion between Matt Slick and
Skylar?
No.
Malpass?
Hovind, the older one. Kent Hovind.
Kent Hovind, sorry.
No.
Oh, really? You know what I would love to do? I would love to Mystery Science 3000, Mystery Science Theater 3000, that discussion with you. Just sit, like, I do a hangout where we're watching that play out, and you listen to the two most stubborn people you've ever encountered. One of them clearly better immersed in the Bible and in Calvinistic theology, and the other one clearly immersed in his own deranged fantasy of, peach pits or apricot pits will cure cancer, and the government's out to get you, and free man on the land, sovereign citizen nonsense. It's bizarre.
Cool.
But it's a shame you hadn't seen it.
I'm not sure how it's not bizarre. Like, don't you understand that the 14th Amendment pretty much incorporated the United States as a corporation that really pretty much disavows that it's actually a legal body that can enforce any action on you.
I had to go to a facility a couple of weeks ago where they have really heavy security, and I got my clearance last summer, so I'm relatively new, but I'm new enough to not screw things up. But it was weird because they do random pullovers and stuff, but I actually got pulled over in a meeting. I wasn't driving. I wasn't being pulled over while driving. It was just a random check stop, but we were in someone's office around a meeting table, and they just came in and were like, "Oh, we need to see make sure you're carrying your cards with you." And everybody shows their card and stuff. And I just was so tempted to just be like, "I'm a sovereign citizen, Article."
You're infringing. I'm not driving right now. I'm traveling. You're infringing. You're infringing my right to travel.
Well, here's the funny part about it, though, is when I was leaving, there's one security gal who is so nice. She works out at the front gate, and she's just one of those people that, all of her coworkers are like, "Oh, she's just nice. She's just, one of the nicest people you ever meet." And when I was going out, I was checking out, she was like, "Well, what are you doing here again?" And she's always said, "It's not." So I said, "Oh, you're not going to believe what happened today." So I told her about how this person just came into this meeting and just started I don't know if she's going to start frisking people or what was going on. And she said, "Well, that's part of our job. We're doing these random things now and whatever." I said, she goes, "You showed your card right away." I said, "No, I was," and of course I lied here. "No, I was totally like sovereign citizen, free man on the land." And one of the group who was standing there is a huge fan, like I am, like you are, of going on YouTube once in a while and typing in the words "sovereign citizen getting owned compilation." And just watching those things like, oh, your window's about to get smashed in 3, 2, 1. Out comes the taser. All right, let's get some semblance of a topic going here. So we've had what's happened in the last couple of days. What do we do with this morality topic? It keeps coming up over and over and over again, and there are people who kind of act like it was just invented for YouTube, that we're gonna talk about morality. This is a very, very old discussion. It's not something that any of us chumps are gonna solve in our little hangouts here. But it had come up in I don't remember who'd hosted the hangout. It might have been Antonio, or it might have been TrueEmpiricism had hosted the hangout. And then some people were kicked out. So then somebody else opened a hangout. It might have been Steve McRae had opened a hangout. And we ended up with the situation again of parallel hangouts because, we can't go into theirs and they can't go in ours. And, but then I guess Skylar Fiction had joined the one hosted by TrueEmpiricism. And Skylar had asked for an argument towards objective morality, the reality of objective morality. And in response to it, TrueEmpiricism said, this was his argument, this is his entire argument, was because subjective morality is not consistent with reality. And there's a bunch of other words that go around that, but nothing that puts any more meat on the bones. And Skylar correctly pointed out that, well, that's not an argument towards objective morality. It would be an argument towards objective morality if it were packaged with the premise that morality exists as either subjective or objective, right? In which case he would have to demonstrate both of those premises. You can't just blurt out, oh, well, subjective morality isn't consistent with reality. You need to support that. And then how does that lead you towards, well, then therefore there exists objective morality? And why don't you guys offer your thoughts on that? Well, I'm going to go address that big crash I just heard upstairs. I'll be right back.
So this is the part where I was kind of talking with Matt and Hogtie before he went on air there, where from a lot of times these arguments are being presented, but not actual as arguments. And the example brought up is if you watch any of the interactions between Skylar and Matt Slick, you'll see Matt Slick go into the argument that when presented with the opportunity to actually present a objective moral fact, he'll ask a question. Is it always wrong to torture babies for fun or pleasure, whichever word he uses there? And the hope of this is that when someone says yes, that they're speaking in some type of absolute sense, that this is always wrong. It's always wrong for everybody to do this, and therefore you have an example of an objective moral fact. And now the problem with this is that just because there might be an agreement on this proposition that's out there, even if you unanimous, agreement in this, it doesn't necessarily demonstrate that it's an objective moral fact. It's entirely possible that just everybody just agrees on this and that's it. And then the common reply from this is when you have somebody that's arguing for like moral subjectivism, like from from Skylar, and this is where I'm going to bust his balls a little bit, is that when he says, hey, take a look at these different cultures with these different attitudes towards, this proposition here, therefore, now we have evidence of cultural relativism. You can bring up examples where, it looks like morality might be subjective or it looks like morality might be objective. Those aren't necessarily arguments for those positions. Those are evidences that you can put out there to kind of support that position or why you might feel justified in believing that position. But it doesn't reach any type of solid conclusion where you can say, therefore, all morals are objective or therefore all morals are subjective.
Well, this I thought was the most egregious part about it, and maybe in a moment here I'm going to play about a minute or 2 minutes from Ronnie's solo hangout today, his hangout from under the bed, as I like to call it, where he tries to flesh this argument out as best he can. And the thing that Ronnie's pointing to is the upswing in violence, the upswing in deaths and immoral acts that tend to refer to them as flare-ups or flares related to, well, when there's atheism, then you get a sudden flare in these immoral acts, including the killing millions of people and all these things. Let's grant that I mean, he's just wrong about that. I don't even know why, you know. I mean, he says, well, if you graph this, you would see this upswing, you know, these flares, you know, saying, okay, well, then show us that graph. Don't just tell us that there's such a graph. But whatever, we can accept that. But I mean, there's a couple of really key mistakes here, and this is partly why I wanted to do this hangout, was because I kind of thought, well, here's how I'm going to address this in a post, and I realized there's no, for me to address this in a post would actually be even a longer post than what I would normally be comfortable putting up. Plus, it doesn't matter, you know, who's going to read it. But here's the thing. So he says, well, he makes a couple of mistakes. The first really big mistake is the complete conflation and confounding of atheism versus, well, either general theism or Christianity, and then conflating that distinction, is ill-defined as it is, with the distinction between people who believe in subjective morality and people who believe in objective morality. So he starts without stating it, that it's just perfectly obvious that every atheist believes in subjective morals, and every Christian, parenthetically / theist, believes in objective morality. And that's mistake number one. I mean, I think the thing is, it's such it's an egregious mistake, but I think that it's something he would miss, because I don't think these guys really think about that much. It's just, to them, it just seems obvious. Well, of course, atheists are all subjective, right? I'm sure if we had a discussion with Ronnie, he would do to us what he did to Alex Botten, when Alex Botten said, well, I'm not a solipsist. And Ronnie just went, well, yes, you are. You know, if there were an atheist who would say, well, no, I'm not a moral subjectivist, he would say, well, yes, you are. You're an atheist. So that's a big mistake. But then the second mistake is, and this is not a minor structural thing, this is your argument is just completely wrong, in that he's saying, remember, his argument is towards there is objective morals. He's saying that in reality, there is objective morality. That's his argument. Then he says, but if you take a look at different cultures where they have different beliefs, then they act differently. Those people who hold the belief in objective morality tend not to commit these crimes and do these immoral acts. Again, that's not true, but let's concede that, whatever, in arguendo we'll accept that. And those who believe in subjective morality tend to go ahead and commit those atrocities. Again, in arguendo we'll grant that, even though he's wrong, right? But you see what I'm saying? His argument isn't objective morality is real. Like, let's come to an argument towards objective morality is real. He's saying in cultures where people believe in objective morality, they don't commit these atrocities. But in cultures where they believe in subjective morality, then they do commit those atrocities. Well, the only thing you can reason to from that premise, which is wrong, but we'll grant it anyway, is that your belief in the nature of your belief in the nature of moral facts is the thing that tends to lead to these difference in the rates of atrocities. It says nothing
Which is just
about,
insane.
yeah, it says nothing about the reality of objective morals. It's like me saying that, you know, there's no square root of 2, and the people who believe in the square root of 2 tend to commit atrocities, and the people who don't believe in the square root of 2 don't commit atrocities. What does that tell us about the square root of 2? At best, if it's an argument at all, at best, it might be an appeal to consequences. But then as soon as you point that out to him, as has been pointed out, he says, no, it's not an appeal to consequences. In fact, you're making an appeal to consequences, is his profound rebuttal.
And when you get into, like, especially the topics such as, for example, the communist atrocities that were committed in the 20th century, these things then that were done for these Marxist ideologies, or like the really extreme Marxist ideologies, were done under the basis of this. These were what they believed was objectively morally good. You know, that this wasn't just that, you know, they realized that, hey, morality is subjective, therefore we're going to kill people. No, they grounded themselves in something that they thought was an objective basis that they can measure it on. And you can say that the morality that they had, that was wrong by whatever standard that you want to use, but it doesn't mean that they were just like all kind of willy-nilly, arbitrarily, like, oh yeah, whatever, like subjective, kill everybody. They objectively thought that what they were doing was for the good.
Yes, I think it's important to clear that up, that there are objective, secular or non-theist moral systems that people hold to, like utilitarianism or contract theory, to name but two. There's a guy who debated William Lane Craig, who put forward an argument for objective morality. Shelley Kagan put forward an argument for objective morality without God. And so there are the idea that if you're an atheist or a non-theist, you're a subjectivist is just nonsense.
Yeah, it certainly is. My morality is constantly evolving based on new data. I need data to determine the consequences of my actions, and if I don't have that data, I don't know what the consequences are.
It makes it subjective.
It is subjective, certainly. My determinations of them are, but the facts that make those determinations are objective facts, such as fire kills people. Now,
fire kills people doesn't say a single thing about morality.
Yes,
unless
it tells
you are defining morality in a way that
it tells you how to behave with people and fire. Is what it does.
Okay, so
hold on. I was making another point, Matt. I'll come back to you in a moment. I'll come back to you in a moment, please. I was making a different point.
Yeah, you're just making a silly point.
That's fine. It can be a silly point. What I was thinking is that when people decide that morality is objective, that generally leads to the idea that knowledge is known, which it certainly is not. There are many situations where I think I could easily reveal moral blindness. And if we had an objective set of morals, there should be no moral blindness.
People don't decide whether things are objective or not. Objective means independent of what people think.
I know what it means, Matt.
So when you talk about when people decide whether the morality is objective, you're telling us what their subjective decision has been.
No, that's not what I was saying, Matt. You're trying to pigeonhole me.
I typed it in the side chat. When people decide morality is objective, that's what you said.
Yes.
So do people decide the shape of the earth?
Nope.
Oh, that's because it's objective as a fact of the matter.
I think that the difference between the points there is that he's when you approach the table, let's say with a clean slate here, is that there's these things out there that we call morals, and what is the nature of morals? And you can be led to believe that morals are based off of some type of objective facts of reality, or you can be led to believe that they're not. And I think that that's kind of what he's saying, is that he's approached there, and what he's decided is that he believes that the best explanation for morals within society is that he believes that there must be objective facts.
Sokka, did you listen to my statement and understand it charitably?
That's just subjectivism.
No, that's not subjective. Saying that
I have the view that the best way to determine morality is based on objective facts. I have the view it could be a statement.
Yeah, it could be a subjective statement about an objective state. That's fine. It's perfectly all to say is that if I come up to you and say that in my personal opinion I believe that the world is round, is a subjective opinion of mine describing an objective state of affairs. There's nothing wrong with coming to that. So just because somebody makes a comment from a position of subjectivity doesn't mean that the target of that comment necessarily has to be subjective as well. And I think that's what you're conflating here.
This is something
trying to pick a fight with me. I understand.
This is something I addressed. Xbox asked this question, I believe it was about 2 days ago, and I posted in reply to Xbox. And I mean, sometimes when I make a post, I kind of like to put it in some place that's going to get a lot of circulation. Whereas if you post it in reply to somebody else's thing, only people who subsequently come to see that thread or had previously posted on it will ever see it. But it didn't matter, and I might revive it to post it elsewhere. But addressing that specific issue, I think this is a super important issue. That there can be an objective fact, something that exists. Let's say objective in the sense of mind independent. So the shape of the Earth, for example, there's a mind independent factual nature to the shape of the Earth, but then my assessment of it is necessarily subjective, and this is not a minor point that can be easily sort of swept aside, and that is when we engage in moral reasoning, even if a person can argue that there's such a thing as objective moral facts, you can't escape. There's two problems. One is Moore's open question. Why do we need to commit ourselves to these moral facts? What is our motivation to to meet these moral criteria. And that's a bigger sort of separate issue, but also just even on the assessment of it. So when you engage in moral reasoning, even if you are reasoning about objective moral facts, which some people grant and some people don't, it doesn't matter, because when you engage in the reasoning, it's inherently a subjective process.
No, I think there's a way out of that, and that's to say, if something exists objectively, then it would exist whether there was no subjects in the universe at all. So if you just had the universe and no human beings there, and then the earth came into existence, the earth would have a certain shape, and that would be the shape of the earth, and there's no human beings there to make an assessment of it. And when you look at morality, you have to do the same with morality. So if there was no human beings on this anywhere in the universe, and all you had was the universe, then you would have to say, well, in that scenario, then would things like rape, murder be right or wrong? Is there a fact of the matter?
Well, what's your answer to that?
I don't.
Well, no,
okay, sorry.
What's your answer to that? It's a great rhetorical question, but what's your answer to that, Matt? Is rape wrong in a universe where there's no sentient minds?
Yes.
Okay.
Why?
Well, interesting.
No,
yeah, I'm going to ask you to defend that. Yeah, I'm going to ask you to defend that. But just real quick, because I've raised this as an issue about, I love the comparison, because the Earth would be whatever shape the Earth is, whether or not there are minds to even contemplate it. The shape of the Earth is so completely mind independent, is that there need not even be minds to contemplate it. But when it comes to something like morality, if you define morality, as I do, as something that is defined in terms of harms and benefits to sentient creatures, as soon as you discuss a universe where there exist no sentient creatures, then there are no moral statements to make.
Well, there would be
that would be incorrect, because there could be that would be ignoring something like Platonism. So if there's a world of moral facts, and that's nothing to do with God, just like a Platonic realm of moral facts, good and evil, and certain things would come under good and certain things would come under evil, that would exist, and there'd be no human beings here to contemplate, consider, evaluate, or do anything with that. But the realm would exist, and those moral facts would exist.
Okay,
so
but
hold on a second. Hold on a second, Jake.
Okay,
just to clarify Matt's position. Matt, just answer true or false of this statement. In a universe without planets, it would be wrong in a universe void of planets.
You're gonna have to repeat the statement. You broke up briefly.
Sorry. In a universe void of planets are still wrong.
Planets are still wrong?
Yeah, in a universe devoid of planets are still round.
That would depend upon whether or not there would be a Platonic world where things like shapes of...
That's a good question.
That world of Platonism needs to be... You can't just put Platonism to the side and say, well, no, there needs to be there needs to be something like that. I'm not even invoking God, just a Platonic realm.
So what you're saying is, in a universe with no minds, there might be a Platonic universe saying rape is wrong and murder is wrong.
Correct.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. I think Sokka had a follow-up. Real quick. Sorry, Brenda, you're next. But I think, Sokka, did you have a follow-up for that? Or that was a great question, but did you have a follow-up? Or
no, that was just to clarify, is that he brings up the Platonic realm, and that's fine. Yeah, if that's the case, and I can understand where he's arguing from.
It is. That's a great question, because it helps wedge those issues. I will say we had a funny moment, because I think you initially said, in a world where there are no planets, in a universe where there are no planets, our planet's still wrong. Like our planet's more. We went, what? Are they still round? I think it was a great thing, and I appreciate your answer, Matt, when you're saying that it depends on whether we want to attribute some sort of Platonic reality to the notion of planets in a universe that doesn't have planets. Although I think it sort of begs a question about whether those things exist.
It's a nonsensical question. Yeah. It's a nonsensical question. It doesn't make any sense at all.
I would agree, Brenda. Actually, I agree. But it falls in line with the saying that in a universe without minds, would or people or whatever would rape still be wrong? And in the same sense, I think that's almost equally as a nonsensical question. So to say that yes or no to that, I think that actually you can't make any type of decision off of something like that, because I think that The objective nature to how we relate these things has to do to, morality being describing, a state of, like relationships of, of entities that do exist, not, hypothetical entities that might exist.
You could say that you're in a universe without any planets, without any spherical objects, but you could say, on the supposition that they did exist, the laws of this particular universe are such that when they formed, they would be spherical due to the nature of gravity, assuming that it operated as it does in our universe or in some way comparable to that.
Yeah, but that doesn't apply to the Platonic realm. That's why I asked the question.
No, that's my secular reply. That's my secular reply.
Well, Platonism is secular.
Yeah.
And so my secular reply to, in the absence of any humans, would rape be wrong? My answer would be, on the supposition of humans or sentient beings, rape would be wrong if they existed. Right?
Yeah, which is just another way of saying if a Platonic realm existed of moral facts, and one of those was rape was wrong, then rape would be wrong.
Well, I'm not making a Platonic argument, you are, but I'm making a secular reply to the same question.
You don't seem to understand that Platonism is not theistic, it's secular. So when you say I'm making a secular response, the response I'm giving is secular.
I thought Plato pretty much believed in some sort of deities in the Platonic realm, didn't he? Didn't he believe that?
Platonism,
I thought he did.
Platonism is not about Plato. Platonism is a view about the world we live in and about other things like that. So it doesn't matter whether Plato was a theist or he was an atheist or an agnostic. We're talking about a Platonic realm, a realm that exists of moral facts, and if that realm existed eternally, then one of those moral facts was that rape is okay, it's fine to rape, then it would be fine to rape, and it wouldn't matter. It's a
strange thing. It's a strange thing because you notice when you get into a discussion like this about moral realism, at some point and it's so crazy, but it makes sense to discuss a world in which these moral concepts don't apply, to decide whether or not those moral concepts exist, because it forces us to sort of look at something like for example,
I don't think I need to invoke Platonism.
Yeah.
I think you did, though. I mean, that's the thing is that maybe okay, all right.
Well, sorry, Brendan, what was your answer on the question? Is it in a universe where there are no sentient minds, is it immoral to whatever?
It doesn't make any sense. The question is a non sequitur.
Yeah. How about this one? How many?
On the supposition, on the real fact that there are real minds in this world, it is objectively wrong to rape people. Yes,
I'm with you.
That's not addressing the question. The question is not if there were minds. The question is if there were no minds. You're not even
but she answered it. She answered it.
I don't think
hold on, stop both of you. Hold on a second. No, that sort of thing I want to avoid, because she answered, Matt, she answered the question, and then further she added to it. She said, in a world where there's no minds, it's a nonsensical question. It's not, you can't just say, well, yes, that's the case, no, it's not the case.
But the thing is, though, it wouldn't be a nonsensical question if there was a Platonic realm of moral facts.
I was not saying it's a bad question.
I don't believe in a Platonic realm. I don't believe in one.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It doesn't matter whether you believe in a Platonic realm or not. If a Platonic realm existed, and of moral facts.
That wasn't the question.
And one of those was that rape is wrong, then rape would be wrong and there'd be no minds to assess it.
How about this one? How many, Brenda, how many vertices does a tesseract have? And if you don't know, I'll give you a big clue here.
There is such a thing as a tesseract.
There is?
Yeah, it has 8.
Well, and most mathematicians would say 16. The tesseract. So
I thought it was 8.
Yeah.
No, mine was a line from a wrinkle.
No, 4, 8. Okay, 16. Yes, you're right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I checked it on Wiki before I asked the question. I thought, but I thought it was 16, but I wanted to be sure because I know it's you sort of double it as you go up each. Yeah, because and then you put a new edge in to connect each of the vertices. So yeah, a mathematician will tell you 16. But does it make sense to ask a question about how many vertices a tesseract has in a world where there are no tesseracts? And Jake, we're getting so far off topic here, but I'm amused by this. Jake, you're saying there are tesseracts in the real world?
That's a line from the book A Wrinkle in Time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You went highbrow on me.
Yeah.
I don't know if there are or are not any four-dimensional cubes.
Yeah, well,
I assume that they are just abstract entities. They're mathematical constructions, right?
Yeah. Well, I go one goofier than that, because I also say that if you were to ask me how many vertices does a triangle have, and I would say that's a ridiculous question because there are no triangles. In the universe where it's sensible to talk about triangles, all triangles have 3 vertices.
Well, in a universe where it's sensible to have tesseracts, they all have 16 because it's defined that way.
Right, and in a universe
just like a triangle, yeah.
Yeah, in a universe where it's sensible to talk about rape or murder or torturing babies for fun, those things are wrong. That's my stance on all of those issues.
They're not wrong because they're defined that way. It's a completely different.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, because
I say they be wrong then.
They're not, because, okay, well, actually, we're going to have to do this, and now Rumpus has joined us. Let's do a quick tour of the panel, and I'm going to do it in the order on the film strip here. Actually, I'm going to go backwards, because it's, I'm going to start with me and then go the order. So me, Brenda, Jake, Matt, Skylar, Sokka, and Rumpus. There is some request from the audience, including, was his name Nessar? I'm going to pronounce that wrong. But you can only get so far to a discussion of morality before you state clearly what your definition of morality is. So I had said sort of loosely that it's connected to harms and benefits to sentient creatures. Do I need to explain it any better than that? Obviously, the goal being to maximize benefits and to minimize harms to sentient creatures. That would be the central moral goal. Now, from that, I agree, Brenda. You don't define rape to be wrong. You don't define murder to be wrong. You don't define torturing babies for fun to be wrong. But it flows obviously, or can be derived from, that central moral statement of increasing benefits and reducing harms to sentient creatures. So let's do, and try to keep your answers relatively short, because I mean these go into sort of camps, right? So Brenda, what's your camp on definition of morality?
I would say it's wrong to cause harm or to by inaction, or we shouldn't act or not act in such a way as we cause harm, and that the rules for society are those that a perfectly rational actor would make for themselves, given that they stand behind the veil of ignorance.
Okay, Jake?
I would have to almost completely regurgitate what you said and just add my own, as I see our experiences on a spectrum between the worst possible misery for everybody and the most sublime happiness for everybody. And I think that movements along that spectrum towards the good, I call good actions, and movement on that spectrum towards the bad, I call bad actions. And I define the most misery for everyone as bad and the most sublime happiness for everybody as good. And that's it.
It's a great answer. Sam Harris would be proud. Scotsman Matt.
He would.
I'm not too sure. I mean, I would think I would define it behaviours of humans which are good or bad, with good or bad being determined from the commands of God.
Okay, so that's a totally, now, okay, we're that's a different one. Okay, everybody else is sort of agreeing. You got a bit of a different one. Mr. Fiction.
Hey, my definition would be morality is the distinction between right and wrong as it relates to conscious beings, right actions being those that positively affect myself and other conscious beings, and wrong actions being those that cause that negatively affect myself and other conscious beings when it can't be avoided. Okay,
you're on the team. Sock account.
Not really.
Wow, I mean, like everybody had really long, detailed answers. Mine's simple, just code of conduct put forward by a group, society, or individual.
Oh, the coherentist. Okay, you're an associate member. You don't get full membership for that answer. Mr. Rumpus, morality, go.
Yeah, I basically agree with your point, but I think there's no objective right or wrong. I don't think murder is objectively wrong. And I think if you decide what's right or wrong, you could say, as Sokka did, that what society says is right or wrong, what your subjective opinion about it might be wrong. And for instance, individuals might believe they're doing something, murder's right, for instance. So how do we say, they're wrong in that? Society basically says this. So in that which case, we hand over the moral judgment to society, and in which case society can be absolutely horrible. I mean, Inca society, I've only had about 3 hours sleep because I've been messing up with the website, so I'll be probably incoherent. So an Aztecs, for instance, ripping out someone's heart in their society was right, and who's to say the individual who disagreed with that is wrong? So there are no objective moral facts. Murder is objective wrong. It just so happens that I believe that that I do go along. I just personally, as a subjective decision, subjectively, I have decided that what you said is correct, that the maximising welfare, minimising suffering is the way I'm going to decide is moral. But everybody, a murderer, a psychopath could easily believe something different. And there's no objective way of saying that's right or wrong.
Okay, so well, with that answer, hold on, with that answer, now it's become a sect, and you and Sokka are officially ejected from our group. So we've got me and Brenda and Jake and Skylar defining morality in terms of harms and benefits to sentient creatures, using different words along the way. We've got Scotsman Matt, who the only one to invoke a notion of God and God's will being an important consideration in making these determination, strangely with no mention of harms or benefits. And then you've got Sokka and Rumpus, who are the breakaway group, the castaway group of people who are saying that it has to do with rules established by a society. Strangely, hold on, this is important. Without
can I address something?
Let me finish, then Sokka, then Brenda. Without mentioning, you guys didn't mention harms and benefits to sentient creatures either. So that's 3 separate camps.
Yeah.
I said.
Well, let me put it this way. Oh, no, hold on a second, Jake. No, I have to clear this up.
Let me do the quick speakers list first. Then what I want to do first. I did say Brenda was next, but what I want to do first is whoever felt that I mischaracterized their position the most. You can go.
That's me.
Sokka, and then after that, Brenda's been waiting, and Jake.
I don't.
Okay.
Sokka.
I just want to make the hat. I get to decide the hat.
Okay. So I want to notice the difference, because the question is, what is morality? Okay, and regardless of what your system is, morality is a code of conduct that that's put forward by a group, society, or individual. That's what morality is. You guys answered the question, what is moral? That's one of the problems. Okay, I was the only person. Me and Rumpus were the only persons that actually answered the question correctly. Well, you guys answered the question about not just about what is morality, but what is moral.
I answered what morality is, and if you look at my definition and I posted in the side chat, you'll see when I said behaviors of humans.
Sorry, Scotsman. I was more referring to the other guys in the room with their position.
Can I just say I was misrepresented there? Hogtie said I never mentioned. Well, I actually said I believe subjectively that my morality is based on the well-being of others and minimising suffering. I said exactly the same thing you did. So to say that I didn't mention that is wrong. But I did say that ultimately the way you've got to measure morality is the only option you've got really is to go with society, because otherwise murderers have got just as much right to decide what's right or wrong. So there is no objective morality. Murder is in fact not objectively wrong. It's just that we've all as a society decided that it is.
Which society do we go to?
Yeah.
That is, yeah.
Exactly.
Brenda,
you haven't shown that.
If you haven't noticed, it's been a knockdown drag out for which society it is for the entire run of human civilization.
So which society do we go to then? Which society has the right answers?
Well, obviously,
if you've noticed,
the one you prefer, the one that matches with what you want to be the case.
Well, you can take your pick. There's a few
so I'll take Iran or Iraq. I'll take ISIS. And
you should probably convert to Islam. I'll give you some advice.
That just makes it subjective, and Sam Harris doesn't postulate subjective morality. He postulates subjective morality.
I agree with that.
For our subjective moral values.
Okay, now
we actually took on board and accepted his work, you would actually represent it correctly.
Okay, now we have an unhealthy, unholy alliance between those of us who are arguing for harms and benefits as being the defining characteristics, along with Matt, against these other two guys, because they're talking about these social conventions and things. Yeah, which society do you pick? And I have an answer to that question. All right, and that has to do with, look at the societies that are able to use evidence-based policy and practice in order to maximize benefits and minimize harms to sentient creatures. That's the teach that I would
And
do.
you're utilitarian.
Okay, so let's say,
I agree.
But,
Yeah, but
hold on,
that-
you've
but
just made a
go
subjective
ahead.
decision to
Hold
say
on.
that's your criteria. That's
Yeah.
something you've done subjectively.
Yeah, that's
right.
just
That's
basically
subjective.
saying,
Moore's, hold on a sec. Matt buzzed in first with an objection. Rumpus says I can answer the most quickly. There's two subjective parts to it. First is the Moore's open problem. And then the second objection is how do we make the moral assessments based on the facts available to us? How do we measure harms? How do we measure benefits? But yeah, I mean, going to Moore's open question, nobody escapes that. But Matt, you buzzed in first. What was your?
yeah, I mean, your criteria for evaluating that's inadequate because you then have to look at the perspective of, I mean, what evidence are you talking about? Are you talking about physical harms? Are you talking about?
We're going to use science to determine those. Oh, sorry, I apologize.
Physical harms? Are you talking about emotional harm? Are you talking about spiritual harm? So, I mean, if you want to beg the question of atheism and non-theism for your resolution, that's fine, but it's not going to be persuasive to a theist. And that's what you need to do there, because if you're talking about spiritual harm, and if something like homosexuality or adultery or fornication cause eternal consequences, harmful eternal consequences for that kind of behaviors, then regardless of what they are physically, taking into consideration the spiritual harm, we would not tolerate those things.
Sure, but you were doing so much better when you formed that unhealthy alliance with us against those other two guys, because as soon as you bring out that I have problems with the subjective assessment, and I'll admit it has to be subjective assessment, how do I assess that some action is harmful or beneficial? How do I assess the sentience of another creature? These are all subjective things. So you tell me, oh, well, so-and-so, you're going to get into a there's a deer comes out in front of the road. Should you swerve to miss the deer and instead hit an oncoming car, hoping that those people are wearing seatbelts, and you merely cost them money and give them some neck pain, whereas you would badly injure the deer? Oh, how do we make those assessments? It's all subjective. Well, Matt, when you fire that cannon, it blows up in your own face, because you've got to think behaviors of humans, which are good or bad, being determined by the nature and commandments of God. How are you assessing the nature and commandments of God? Short answer, subjectively.
But no, well, and in what sense am I doing it subjectively? So if God exists and God reveals His commands through revelation, then where is the subjectivity there? So let's say I think, hey, okay, I need to swerve here. I'm going to take the chance that I can hit that car, that they've got an air cushion in there, that's going to protect them from serious harm. And that's my subjective opinion, but then I get a revelation from God and say, no, don't do that, kill the deer. My subjective view is overridden by that divine command.
Well, hold on a second. Hold on. What happens if instead of it was a revelation from God? What happens if you had your cell phone in the car and it was your best bud, that said, screw that, hit the deer.
Hold on.
Yeah, hold on a second, Jake.
Go ahead.
But on my understanding of God's revelation, then there wouldn't be an option there. I would kill the deer, because I don't view deer as creatures. I don't view deers or any other animals to have the same value as human life. So
what I'm trying to. Guys, hold on a second. Sorry. What I'm trying to get at you is that you've switched. That you've had this, this message in your head pop up, or whatever, saying that you should do this, and you base that on now. You switch from your opinion of what you're going to do to God's opinion of what you should do. I'm just wondering, and I'm trying to compare that to, okay, what's the difference between switching from what you're going to do to, your best friend's, what he's going to do? Like that would still be subjective. So I'm trying to think about how
subjective at all. Because
are you saying that if your friend told you something, it wouldn't be subjective?
No, I mean, the problem is you're making an invalid analogy between my friend and God. So in my view, God would be an absolute source of perfect, infallible moral commands. So it's not like my friend who can be wrong about what to do, who is just making the same kind of evaluation as I would be doing based on my human frailty. The revelation is coming from a source that cannot be wrong on what to do in any given situation.
Okay, but now what you're doing is you're changing the definition of objective to something that is infallible. I mean, like, I don't understand.
Independent.
Okay, but is it dependent on the mind of God still? Like, God's actions, he might be completely perfect. That's okay. So if
perfectly moral, infallible being. based on that, anything that comes from him, as long as he's not a deceiver God, and that's another argument, like Stephen Law's evil God. But on that being granted, then anything that comes from any commandment or any instruction that comes from anything we recognize or we believe to be a perfect, infallible source of moral rights and wrongs should always take precedence over our opinion of what's right or wrong as individuals and as a society and as a civilization.
But again, okay, so going back to your best friend Chuck now, okay, so your best friend Chuck, you're gonna do all your actions now based off of the nature of Chuck. You think Chuck's a pretty cool guy, so okay, I'm gonna build my moral framework off of what Chuck would do. Okay, so it's completely objective because it's based on his nature. But now, are you trying to define now that something you can't just simply say something's objective when it's based off of nature? It's got to be based off of a perfect nature. Because now you're just adding in more criteria to what your definition of objective means.
No, I mean, objective means mind independent. We agree on that. I haven't changed the definition of objective. Mind independent.
Yeah, so Chuck's great. So Chuck's nature is mind independent, and therefore you can build an entire objective moral framework off of Chuck.
But Chuck's nature is not that of God, which is a greatest.
But it's still objective because it completely meets the criteria of what objective morality is within your worldview now, because it's just based off of Chuck's nature. It's not even your nature. It's not your opinion. Chuck has no idea what his nature is. It's mind independent of himself. Chuck just acts the way that he does, and that's it. And we try to emulate that. Therefore, any moral system based off of Chuck's nature can be, by definition, an objective moral framework.
Yes. If you went down that route of mind independent, and that's the only thing you were focused on, you could have an argument there. But what I'm saying is that this source, this analogy is when you try to compare my friend or Chuck or anything like that with the greatest conceivable being, who, by definition, is perfectly morally good. Now, anything that comes from that source is going to be the correct. If that source says it's right to do this, it cannot be wrong.
Yeah, but that's beside the point. The point would be: is it objective or not? Okay, so are you saying that any moral system based off of Chuck's nature would be an objective moral system? Okay, great, cool, thanks.
Yes, I mean that's what utilitarianism and social contractualism is. It's constructed by human minds, but it makes the pretense that, let's imagine the most reasonable group of human beings acting at their most rational. That's what they do. It's still called an objective moral system, but it's constructed by individuals who are imagining that they are not what they are, but they are the most rational creatures. I think that was Brenda's definition of, someone mentioned something like sounding like contractualism.
So,
my earlier point, so we're going to get Helena in this too. Just brace yourself, Helena. So, I mean, my earlier point was that even if you could say that there is a perfect moral standard that exists in God, the fact that revelation has to be piped into you somehow means that you need to make a subjective assessment of it. And I think it's very easy for a theist to say, well, what if God just reveals it to me? Well, okay, so you're in that moment in your car. And part of the problem with some of these moral questions is when time is urgent, you have to swerve or not swerve, but sometimes you have to make a more of a long run decision. So I'd use the example in a previous hangout about what if you have a couple of friends that you know these people, you're reasonably good friends with both of them, and you come to discover that the man is having an extramarital affair and his wife doesn't know about it, and then at some point he asks you to lie on his behalf to help cover up for this affair. Do you owe it to your friend to lie to your other friend to protect his affair so that their marriage isn't blown up by this thing? Or do you owe it to her to tell her the truth because you're committed yourself to tell the truth to people? Or do you owe it to this principle of when in doubt, do nothing, or it's none of your business, stay out of it? So regardless of your particular answer to that question, my idea is how would God reveal this to you in a way such that you could be certain that you know that you are doing the right thing? Like God doesn't appear to you. Yeah, well, that's the thing. You have to make a subjective assessment of, and I know there's people WWJD. What would Jesus do? What would Jesus want for you to do? Well, how do you ever come to that opinion? You flip open a Bible and you flip through it. And you put your hands together and you pray, and at some point, you come to a decision. Well, should you be throwing homosexuals off the roof? Well, Christians are going to tell you, no, you shouldn't be doing that. Should you stand up when your government says, well, we should let them get married. Most evangelicals, at least, will say, yes, you should stand up against that. I mean, how are these decisions ever grounded in objective morality when there's such a meandering, twisty trail of path to God's divine revelation to people's subjective understanding of it?
Because, well, first of all, we have God's revelation through the scriptures, and the scriptures can't just be brushed aside like you tried to do. So, like, just open up the pages of the Bible.
Not specific enough, Matt.
For Christians, for example, the Bible is the inspired word of God. It speaks clearly about homosexuality, that homosexuality is sinful behavior, and because it speaks clearly about homosexuality being sinful behavior, then there's no question about whether the church should sanction gay marriages. On Christianity, then the church should not sanction gay marriage, and they should take a stand against that as immoral behavior.
Sorry.
I'd like to come in off the roof.
Because the Bible always the Bible also prohibits murder.
I just want to finish up my point, and then I'm going to step back out of the conversation and let everybody else go in.
Okay, and then Helena and then Jake. Let me introduce them. Go ahead, Saka.
Okay. Now, the reason why I was bringing that stuff up is that, even within most moral subjectivist, viewpoints, or in some more moral subjectivist viewpoints, is that they come up with this idea of kind of like there's universalist forms of subjectivism, where they can, imagine like this, go to like the Platonic realm or whatever, this perfect person who's always going to make the most rational, most correct, most morally right decision. And they can still build off that. Now, this is within the category of ethical subjectivism, okay? And where you imagine this person and you try to emulate those actions, this hypothetical person.
You're breaking up really badly.
Yeah, now you've really broken up.
Yeah, we lost you there, Saka. I'm sure you were making a good point. I'll agree with whatever you were going to say. Helena, as the only LaVeyan Satanist in the room, personal view is just go nuts, do what thou willst.
And she must be filing down her horns. I don't see the horns on her.
Yeah. Look, everyone else in the room has accused me of misrepresenting their position when I ask them to state their position clearly.
Oh, so great! I can't wait for my turn.
I'm going to start by misrepresenting your position.
Yeah. Okay, go for it.
Yeah, where I already called you a Satanist. Where are you on this definition of morality thing? Answer crisply, please.
Definition of morality. I don't quite know what you mean. I think the definition of morality is like the set of all things concerning what we ought and ought not do. Is that not what you mean, or do you mean what do I think is moral, or what is my moral theory?
Yeah, moral theory. How does one go about? So there's an action. You're at a point where you're going to either do action X or action Y, and remember, X or Y might even be an inaction. Right. What are the criteria by which we decide which of those are moral versus immoral, or good versus bad?
I'm kind of in flux about moral theories right now. So I'm starting to come to the conclusion that there isn't any one particular theory, and that to try to start from the principle and go down is not going to ever lead anywhere. I don't think any of us, and now I could be wrong about this. Somebody said that they had a way around
you and I together.
But I think that there's no way any of us can get around the is ought. I think we're all screwed there. I think Moore's open question applies to all of us, and there's no way around that either. So I think that it's got to be situational, embedded in the context, moment by moment. And as an atheist, I have to say there's some sort of biological component that guides us. I guess that's sort of the best I've got right now.
I'll concede it, but what makes something right versus wrong? When I ask you how does a person judge what's right versus wrong, and I don't want to accuse you of being evasive here, but when I ask you what's the difference between right and wrong, you're saying, well, people have to decide right and wrong, and it's going to depend when they're deciding the circumstances and how they're deciding, and sometimes they might decide this way and sometimes they might decide that. How are we deciding right versus wrong?
Well, are you asking me to describe how different people decide right versus wrong?
Not anymore, because you keep dodging, so I'm going to go on to someone else.
No, I'm not trying to dodge.
I give up.
How would you decide?
Sorry, where did I get to before I DC'd?
Look, you said
I can tell you personally how I think I'd go by not doing harm. That's what I think I go by.
So you're on the harms and benefits team. Okay, thank you. You're in, you know what, associate member, because you just, I don't know why it took you so. But yeah, you're on. So it's us versus Matt, borderline divine command theorist, versus Sokka and Rumpus, who I think would join any maddening cult and just do whatever the rest of the group did. So now having fairly characterized everyone's position. Oh, Dragnut's joined us.
Sorry, Hogtie, where did I get you before I DC'd?
You said something brilliant. We all agreed with that. Hold on a second. Sokka, you said something brilliant. We all agreed with you, and we've moved on. Dragnut, what's your definition of morality?
Well, I just got done taking a shower, and you sent the link. I thought this was for a webcam show. I don't know what the fuck's going on.
Can I just, while Dragnut's doing that, can I just point out that our biology does provide us with one objective means that we can detect whether some biological organisms do improve, but even then we've got a problem, as I was saying earlier, that you don't, whether to make something minimize suffering and increase well-being, that's not necessarily associated with a moral decision. You can just say that's what happens. We can see that things improve the well-being of something, in the sense it works better, the biology is something. So if you decide subjectively that that's what you're going to base your moral system, which is you've done, Hogtie, you said you seem to have inherently linked to well-being to the moral issue, but that's something you've subjectively decided to do, and you keep on saying that you've decided that a moral thing is well-being, but you haven't really justified that.
Well, I can justify it,
and I can't. But go ahead.
I think I can. It's not a justification. It's a definition. Well-being to me is health and happiness, which includes mental happiness, which includes your living space.
Yeah, but why is that right or wrong? Who says that's what that's good or bad?
I'm saying that these are the things that benefit mental health, and the things that benefit physical health are the things that we need to set in stone.
Why do we care about
benefiting? You've decided that's subjectively that is what you're going to do.
Yes.
Well, right, okay, fine. Well, so it's nothing objective about it. You've decided subjectively to say, right, that is what you can have an objective system. You can say, right, these are the rules, but you've got to subjectively say, aha, these are going to be the rules that I can apply objectively to everybody, universally, etc., but I'm going to subjectively decide those are the rules.
But I can say, is it an objective truth that these things benefit mental health? And I think I can say yes.
But it's like good or bad. It could be, you could decide that it's a good thing to decrease mental health.
But I haven't. In this situation, it is a good thing to increase mental health. That is what good is.
Based on what standard? Based on what
standard? This is the standard. You define it.
Let me interject.
By definition, yes. By definition.
Let me interject on this point. This is there's sort of two problematic interfaces or two problematic ends to when you discuss morality and moral reasoning, and this is the top end, and it's the why would we bother type of a thing. For reference, I'll say I was introduced to this about 2 or 3 years ago as a G.E. Moore's open question. And it comes down to, well, why shouldn't you park in a handicapped parking spot? Well, because you're inconveniencing someone. Well, then why shouldn't I, or why should I not inconvenience someone? Well, because you might get a ticket for it. Well, why should I worry about getting a ticket? Well, because it costs you money. Well, why should I worry about it costing me money? Right? That basically is the same sort of problem. It's the moral equivalent of
the. You just made an argument from consequences.
Sure, but then why should I worry about the consequences, right? And these things go on. I mean, we can anytime.
But that's different.
No, it's not. It's not because you don't know where I'm going with it.
I think I know where he's going with it, and I'd like to hear him continue.
It can go any other way. Like you can talk about a child being brought into an emergency room and the consent papers are signed. The kid's got a hot appendix and the surgeon's there ready to do the surgery, and then he decides, nah, I'm not going to do this surgery. That is an immoral inaction. Well, why? Well, because you took that job that says you're going to help those people. Well, why should I help people? Well, the little girl's going to die if you don't do this, right? Every foundation that you propose for your moral decision can be questioned, and the thing that justifies that moral decision can be questioned. It's the moral reasoning equivalent of the justificatory regress problem that you have with epistemology, right? And that can be done. And what's interesting about it, that can be done for any moral system. I've had this discussion with Andrew Rappaport when he was saying, well, what do you care about harms? What do you care about benefits to other sentient creatures? What do you care if other people do well? You know, why do you care about that? Why do you care about that? Well, you can turn it around on them and do the same thing and say, well, why, you know, when they say, well, we have to do things consistent with God's nature. Well, why do you care about doing things? Well, because he's the creator of the universe. Well, why do you care about doing what the creator of the universe says, right? And you can do the same thing. It baffles them when you do it, but that's
So
G.E. Moore's open question.
You can avoid that by taking moral experience as properly basic.
Well, I know how to answer that question. Go ahead.
Matt, did you finish your point there?
Example with
let's let Matt finish his point first. I didn't actually even hear what it was.
Yeah, I think you can avoid what you were talking about, Moore's open question there, by for anyone who takes moral experience as properly basic.
What?
Oh, well, I find that a little, okay. But I mean, in terms of the definition of harms and benefits, I think that the question can be asked, why do you care about harms and benefits to sentient creatures? Why don't you care about harms and benefits to furniture or whatever else? But sorry, I think Rumpus, you wanted to come back on that, and then Brenda, I guess.
Just want to say, I didn't like your example about the. I didn't like your example about the parking space because you were talking about the negative consequences for you if you get a fine. I don't think that's quite. We're talking here about trying to be objective here about whether the perhaps you just didn't represent your argument very well. But I think just if you said the consequences for the society or everybody around you was bad if you parked in there, but just to say that you suffered a fine, I don't think that's a basis for deciding whether something's good or bad. And another point I was going to make, I think I've forgotten about the. Sorry, I've forgotten those.
There is a point I'd like to make.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll remember it, Rumpus. Jake, go ahead.
The reason I know why those types of things make me feel bad. There's a anatomical, physical reason when somebody's in pain around you. A biological reason. You have mirror neurons in your brain that mimic the emotional state of people around you.
Oh, stop Dragnor, please. Beepy thing.
If you ask me why I don't want to do this to somebody else, and I would say because it physically makes me feel bad. I do not want to put that person through pain because I will go through pain.
That's a very bad argument.
It's not though.
If you ask, Shut the fuck up.
Just real quickly. Yeah, that's exactly the point I was making, Jake, earlier about the biology. And but you've got to have in that, you've got to say you've got empathy. So you as a biological being know what makes you feel good or bad. And then if you're prepared to say, right, okay, I believe other people are entitled to that same feeling, and I'm going to have empathy, then you can build a sort of objective moral system from that. But you've got to decide that's what you're going to do, because some people, of course, don't believe in having empathy for other people.
Right. I mean, nonsense. I mean,
because it's an evolutionary advantage.
If you take the individuals,
wait a minute.
Hold on, Scott.
Hold on. We got to dial down the interrupting and over talking a little bit, if we could, please. I want to say that, Jake, I find that an unsatisfying and incomplete. I think it does explain part of our moral experience, but I find it unsatisfying and incomplete. I'd love to explain that, but I know Matt was in first. So, Matt, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I mean, you can just negate that with a simple counterexample. When people are throwing homosexuals off tall buildings to their death, they don't feel bad about it. Everything in their physical body is happy about it. They're elated about it. They're high on it. So if you're evaluating whether or not an action you are doing is good or bad, morally good or morally bad, based on how it makes you feel, and throwing homosexuals off tall buildings to their death makes you feel good, then that's going to affirm that the action you're taking is morally good.
Okay, and I'll respond by saying that your brain interpolates a lot more than just the facial expressions of those in your direct vicinity. Perhaps
what the indoctrination.
Not a very.
I'm not talking about smiling. I'm talking about an internal feeling of happiness, not a smile on your face. They actually feel happy.
I agree.
The same way you feel happy if you help an old lady across the road. They feel happy if they're throwing a homosexual off to their death, because in their worldview, in their view, that's doing something that's good and it makes them feel good.
And And if I had maybe, I don't know, 20 years of Scientology indoctrination, I would feel euphoria sitting on an e-meter and talking about my thetans.
Yeah, well, then that would make that right, wouldn't it?
Jake, your point was a bit flawed because you were saying it made you feel bad when other people suffered, and that's not a good foundation. Because as Matt was saying, if you felt good about making other people feel miserable, that wouldn't be a good basis for deciding whether something's objectively good or bad, would it?
And that's not even hypothetical because that happens all the time.
It would be a shorthand version of a book-long answer to that question.
It would be by definition. It would be by definition subjective, because that's what the definition of subjective means: is that it's your personal subjective belief.
Well, consider murderers.
And nothing anybody has said so far even touches what I had to say.
Okay, let me cut in for a second. I wanted to just kind of give a meandering, incoherent version of morality. For one, let me start by reiterating something. I don't intrinsically value human life. I mentioned this the other day, and that's because of life experiences that I've had. One of the things that I do know that I cannot live in this society, in this world with other human beings without the help of other human beings. So it would be beneficial for me to not kill them and not steal from them because I don't want them to do it.
So it's pragmatic.
Huh? Yeah,
so yours is pragmatic, Drag.
Yes, mine is more of a pragmatic, I guess in a way utilitarian version.
Your thing.
That's people keep sending me a request for the link, but y'all have to ask Hawtai, stop messaging me. So my morality would be based on two tiers. Some objective moral facts, such as you should not kill another human being, and you should not steal from another human being. And then broken down at the second level of preferences. You should give up your spot to an old lady, and certain things like that really has little consequence, but you get the good feelings sometimes depending on your subjective feelings about helping people.
That's the same argument Jake was making.
How is I should not kill somebody an objective fact? I think I should. I think I should sometimes.
Yes. Yeah,
I don't.
That's subjective.
I disagree that
you do. I don't do subjective opinion.
Killing someone's okay. Well, you can say that, but I can kill someone because they've committed a crime. I can kill someone because they've tried to kill me. What has that actually done?
I can kill someone because I enjoy doing it. What's objectively wrong about that?
But that would and that's the issue. That for me is not a preference. If I'm killing someone, I'm taking away from the workforce potentially.
So what? What's wrong with taking away from the
You're taking away the workforce. You're incrementally raising the wages of the remaining workers.
Yes, I don't think that's a very good argument.
That's like I said. For me, it's
yeah. I gotta say something about that. Hold on a second. Hold on. A couple of things. So yeah, I know everybody knows that Dragnut is behind the scenes the executive producer of everything that's on my channel as well as JD Keynes, but that doesn't mean he's giving out the link. Everybody knows I'm Hogtie Champ on Google Plus and on Hangouts and on Skype. So you've got lots of ways to get a hold of me. Please don't message Dragnut. Dragnut, there is a way on Android devices to turn off the vibe function. Probably more annoying than you realize, but if you can do that, obviously you're
Drag.
Yeah. And I don't just say that I could do that quietly, but that's really for everybody. I hear a lot of Hangouts where like if you're in a Hangout with Arcane, you're going to hear it all the time, and it's a very, very simple thing to turn off on your mobile device, and I really encourage the planet to do so. Who did I interrupt to make that observation?
No.
Well, I just want to emphasize this thing again about we haven't quite pinned down what makes things objectively bad or good, and the fact that we're making subjective decisions about it. And then things like murder, if we just consider, is murder right or wrong? I think that'd be a very good, or similarly with throwing people off buildings. Well, and I do believe that it's not objectively right or wrong. It's just that we've made decisions because we're biological entities, and we have empathy. So this is basically what sort of Jake was saying, but I don't think it was, you have to make a decision. It's a subjective thing to say, I have empathy for my fellow human being. Hold on, Jake. Sorry, Scotland, just a second. And if you make that decision subjectively, but it is a subjective decision, it's something you've personally made. And murderers and sociopaths also make decisions subjectively, and they come up with an answer that's against society. So ultimately, it's society that decides what's right or wrong, and not us.
No.
Brenda, then Jake.
If society said rape was okay, then we'd be okay with rape then.
Rape would still be wrong.
Brenda, then Jake.
It's not an opinion. It's not a vote. A morality is not a vote.
Well, I mean,
right?
There are some competing factors here. There's your biology. If you decide you've got empathy, if you've got empathy,
I appreciate that. Yeah, no, I appreciate that you think you're back and forth with everybody, but the problem is that you're sort of being able to offer your own rebuttals to every individual point raised.
Okay.
Let's let some other people get in. Brenda, then Jake.
Okay. I think Scott's spoken more than I have anyway. But okay.
On my view, what constitutes an action being right or wrong action is whether or not a perfectly rational actor from behind the veil of ignorance would set up the rules for society in such a way, in that way. So,
and how would you evaluate that? How can you evaluate what a perfectly rational actor would do or not do?
By the use of reason.
But you're not a perfectly rational. You're not a perfectly rational agent.
Which is objective. It's a hypothetical. It's a thought experiment.
Yeah, but you're not a perfectly rational being. And you're trying to imagine what a perfectly rational being would do based on you not being a perfectly rational being. Maybe a perfectly rational being would act completely contrary to what you would act as an imperfect rational being.
Yes, maybe a perfectly rational being would be irrational.
Well, I have an objective basis because rationality is objective, right?
Is it?
It is, yes.
Okay, demonstrate to us that rationality is objective, mind independent. Remember, rationality is reasoning, and reasoning is done by minds, and the definition of objective is mind independent. How can you have reasoning without minds?
The definition of objective is that it is not up to my personal subjective opinion.
Mind
it is not. It is not. No, it is not my opinion that the law of non-contradiction, the law of identity apply. That's not my opinion.
What is it then?
Therefore, it's objective. It's an objective fact of reason, of logic.
Can you demonstrate that?
Logic is objective.
So can you demonstrate that?
Brendan, what are you saying?
Because it's not up to me. It's not up to me whether or not logic applies or not.
So demonstrate what you're asserting. Demonstrate to us that logic is objective.
Yes. I just did.
When? You just did. What are you saying?
What are you deriving from your use of logic? I haven't quite worked out what it is you're proposing.
That a rational actor from behind the veil of ignorance would create the rules for all of us to obey, for all of us to follow. In such that person, those rules are objectively moral because they are based in reason.
Which person is this?
It's a hypothetical.
Right. So you don't have access to a perfectly rational being's mind. So how do you know?
I have access to rationality.
So let's say for example, you have the belief that abortion is morally evil. But then a perfect rational being's mind is behind the veil of ignorance would come to the conclusion that it's okay. How do you have access to what
we would have to?
How do you have access?
We'd have to work that out. We'd have to work that out with the various arguments.
And how would you work that out as an imperfect rational being?
Through logical, rational debate and argumentation.
Okay, but you're an imperfect rational being, right?
Well, okay.
So how can you have?
So we get there gradually. We get there gradually. Societies have taken time to realize, for instance, that slavery is wrong.
Okay, wait a minute. Do you agree that every person in this hangout is an imperfect rational being?
Sure.
Okay, so how could a collection of imperfect rational beings ever gain access to the thinking of a perfectly rational being?
We approach it gradually.
How do we do that?
It's a process through the process of reasoning.
Okay, but our reasoning is not perfect, right?
Well, no, it's not perfect, but it does approach. It does approach a limit.
Society does this, doesn't it, Brent?
Okay,
you're talking about what society does.
It approaches there, but never gets there.
So I'm curious. Okay, what in the equation does this perfectly rational being present? Please give me like an example of what you're to. The imperfect rational beings are missing something. So what is that?
So we should not cause harm. We should not cause harm. So a common reply is that, you know, what about people like dictators or other people, murderers and stuff? And the reply would be that even a dictator or a murderer would not order society if they're from behind the veil of ignorance in such a way that they might be caused harm.
But that's assuming that the perfectly rational mind, the actor, behind the veil of ignorance, would come to the conclusion that causing harm to other people is wrong.
Yeah, I think. Yes. I think that.
I think so how do you get access to that? How do you get access to that? How do you get access to that?
Through reason, debate, and argument.
So through imperfect reasoning, you think you get access to perfect reasoning. How does that work?
I think that 1 + 1 = 2 is perfect reasoning.
Yeah, that's not even real.
That's very different.
No, I don't see the
mathematical. That's just a mathematical convention.
Right.
That's so definition.
Again, the question remains: how would you, as an imperfect rational agent, ever get access to the thinking of a perfectly rational being? You have no experience of such a being. We could only ever approximate what we think they would do, but that just leaves us at our imperfect evaluation with our reasoning of what they would conclude. It might be the complete opposite.
I don't think so. I think that you get progressively closer and closer to.
How do we get closer? How do we get closer? With our imperfect reasoning?
Yeah.
Okay. How do we get anywhere near what a perfect rational actor would ever think as imperfect? We're imperfect reasoners, right?
Yeah. We make successive.
Matt, you're gonna hold on, Matt. Matt, we don't have to be perfect to come to the right answer. Hold on, Matt. We don't have to be perfect to come to the right answer. I can make a judgment that could be right or wrong, but I could be right. So just because we are imperfect doesn't mean to say you can't come to the right answer.
Yeah, you could chance upon the right answer.
Yes, exactly. So you have to accept that's a possibility.
You can make progress towards
we could chance
information.
We could chance upon an agreement with the perfectly rational mind
on history.
Yeah, but
the fact
with the help of society, Matt, we can make better. We can come up with better
what society?
Yeah, exactly.
What particular society?
I agree with you, but exactly.
So give us a society that we should use. Give us a society we should use as our model for objective reasoning.
As I've said before, I don't think you can do that, but I think I've subjectively decided to go with. I don't understand Brenda's confidence that she's got some sort of handle on the way to get objective morality. I don't believe you can do that, but I can say if you take the principles of our biology and take it from there and empathy, you can then build an objective framework. But you have to accept you've based it on the idea of the well-being and the reducing suffering as a principle, but that's something you have to presume. You can't just.
So if I don't presume that, then it's useless.
You're in trouble. Yeah, I completely agree with you, Matt. If you don't presume that, you're in trouble. Yeah, it's flawed if you don't presume that.
Do any of us dispute we have moral experiences?
No, but what I wanted to do was bring it back to this point we made earlier, where Hogtie was going through how a Christian decides what's moral and what's not. And when they're faced with something like homosexuality, flips through the Bible, says nothing, and they have nothing to go on. And you said that he brushed it all aside. And
go ahead, Jake. Go ahead. Well, I just want to clarify that when I made that specific point, I was addressing the radical evangelicals as they state their moral reasoning to be. Not that I was saying that of all Christians, because there's certainly a great diversity. As a matter of fact, what I wanted to do here quick was just a one-word answer. Do you think morality is subjective, objective, neither, or both? Just going across. Brenda.
I'm sorry, what? I was reading something. Could you please repeat it again?
In your view, is morality objective, subjective, neither, or both?
Currently, I believe morality is objective until proven otherwise.
Okay, Dreg?
Both.
Both, okay. Dress? I just shout out your answers. Forget going in order. Just everyone shout out your answers. try to not overlap.
Ultimately subjective, but but from a subjective point of view, you can come up with an objective framework. But it's an objective framework you've come to subjectively.
Yeah. Skylar says subjective. Scotsman Matt says objective.
I believe that we make subjective determinations based on an objective state of affairs.
I'm with you. Yeah. Let me try this, and I appreciate now we've kind of let it go nice, and people have been able to. But I'm going to brace yourself because let me take a couple of minutes to lay this out. I want to lay out an analogy and I want to get your thoughts on whether or not this is a useful analogy. And the reason I'm offering it is because I think it characterizes my position on why you can't just say, "Yep, morality's objective." Boom, done. And it might even be incomplete to say that it's subjective. I think that it is incorrect to say that morality is wholly objective, because there's two ends to it, to where some subjective assessment has to be made. So I want to get off the moral thing. Let's just compare it to a situation that isn't moral. It's just a factual determination somebody has to make. I use the example of an amusement park ride operator who is there at his post, and there's a sign there that says, "You must be this tall to ride." And as people approach, he has to make a judgment. Some people are tall enough to ride, other people are not tall enough to ride. And people come and, "No, you can go, no, you can't, you can go, no, you can't," like that. Now, there's sort of three elements to this. The first one is somebody might ask, you'll see this to be the parallel for G.E. Moore's open question, except applied to morality, in this case it's amusement park rides, is that why is that standard there? Why do we need that line? And then people that are taller can go, and people that are not up to the height of that line can't go. And the management might say, well, because people who are shorter than that line tend to fall out of the car. And they said, well, why should we try to avoid people falling out of the car? Well, because they get hurt when they do that. Well, why should we avoid people getting hurt? Well, because we don't want to hurt people, and some of those hurt people end up suing us. Well, why should we avoid getting sued? Well, because we're a business. We're here to make money. Why should we avoid? Okay, so you can go on forever and ever with a justificatory regress in terms of trying to justify why the line is on the sign. That is a problem that's there. But the point is, they are committed, for whatever subjective reasons, they're committed to saying this line is a good reason. Now, the second stage of it, I would say, is objective. There is a line, and in reality, it is a mind-independent truth that the next person who comes up to that sign is taller than that line, and the person behind them is not taller than that line. That is objectively true. It is a mind-independent fact that this person is taller, that person is not taller. But then the third element of it is the subjective assessment of it. The person who is making the assessment, the ride operator who's making that assessment, is doing so from their own perspective, where he's standing on the platform, how carefully he looks to compare the person to the line, whether or not the person is standing or slouching or stretching or wearing shoes that are too thick or whatever else. So even if a person were to make the argument that middle thing, I'm going to go back to morality now, even like I'm saying, in that situation, the line is an objective thing. It's a mind-independent thing. Even if a person could frame a definition for morality that is in its nature objective, as I would, I think that it is an objective thing to say a good definition for morality is to increase benefits and decrease harms to sentient creatures. I can say that's an objective standard. You're still going to be bracketed by the subjective parts. Why do I care about harms and benefits to sentient creatures? And then bracketed on the other side with it of how the heck do I ever assess harms and benefits and sentience? So is that a useful analogy to kind of presenting my view on it? And then second, am I crazy? Is that just a stupid way to look at morality?
So you agree with me, basically?
No, I think that analogy is great.
I mean, first of all, I reject your definition of morality. It's just an arbitrary definition picked out of your ass. But second of all, you never addressed this previously. I don't think there is an open question with Moore if you take morality as properly basic. You just waved that to the side and said, "Oh, let's just move on from that."
Because I didn't understand it. I didn't understand it, so we will come back to it.
Do you have moral experiences?
I just want to know what arbitrary means to you.
Hold on, let's not skip, because we got this issue on the table right now. Matt, so noted. You're right. I did just ignore that because I literally didn't know what you meant by it. But yeah, if it's important, then let's come back to it. But this analogy, Jake agrees. I think Dragnet agrees. Rumpus, go ahead.
You seem to describe something I was describing earlier. You seem to be repeating something I said, Hoctor, where you make a decision, you make a subjective decision to say that the welfare of others and suffering of others is the thing you're going to, as a premise for your decision. But once you've done that, you can then create a set of objective rules following that, at least you can try and evaluate them, because obviously evaluating what's good or bad, and you can do with the, you know, the consequences and whether you want to maximize, you know, oh God, I forgot the name of the bloody moral system where you try and maximize the welfare of the maximum number of people. That sort of thing.
I would like to figure out how much about that is objective. Like, what configuration of brain with what amount of mirror neurons would make such and such decision?
None.
Well, you don't know that. You're not a neurologist.
No, because objective
brain states don't get you to what's good or right, good or wrong. Brain states are brain states.
I don't think you understand what I was asking, Matt. Or saying. I wasn't really asking anything.
Were you trying to evaluate how much better you're making someone feel, or the spectrum of making people feeling better about themselves, or increasing the suffering in terms of the number of how happy you make someone is dependent on the number of happy neurons you've activated?
Something like that. I would say Hogtie is a relatively good person, okay? Like, he's not gonna, you can have him watch your kids, okay? So there is a physical state that is his brain right now. That configuration leads to that behavior.
That assumes
so I want to know.
That assumes that physical
states. Yes, it assumes a lot of things, Matt. I'm trying to get through a thought.
So why should why accept those assumptions?
Hold on, Matt. Let Jake finish the sentence.
Amounts of speculation, okay, pulled right out of my head. Okay, I want to know. K, just something on your keyboard. Okay, thank you.
My happy neurons fire every time I eat a baby.
I'm just saying. I want to know.
They're delicious.
I'm just saying that I want to know what anatomically is a happy brain, is a good person. What neurologically speaking does that physically look like?
Again, that assumes that happiness and goodness are linked to a brain state, and the only reason I was bringing it up was because that Rumpus was remarking on Hogtie's analogy, saying that it was similar to his, that you make a subjective determination. And I'm saying that if I put this brain here, it's probably going to make this determination, and if I put this brain here, it's going to make this determination. Making that an objective fact, would this brain make this determination, or a set of neurons configure it?
It's actually simpler than that, to be honest, Jake, because you can turn around with the argument and say, are there chemicals that we can introduce into the brain that changes the emotional state of the imbiber?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
There are. So that would be my argument, to say that we can link certain brain states to certain emotional reactions within the brain.
Which tells us what about morality? What does that tell us about morality? Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, that's correct.
It tells you that your subjective determinations are influenced by more than you think.
Yeah, so I'm not interested in subjectivity. I'm interested in objective. What's the fact of the matter? Is rape factually wrong, or is rape factually right? That's what I want to know. And you haven't given me anything.
Yeah, for rape. So Jake, for a rapist, they would be happy.
You haven't given me anything apart from a definition. You haven't given me anything but a definition I reject. Sam Harris's definition, old tired definition of Sam Harris, that I reject to answer that question.
How do you answer it?
I answer the question that rape is wrong, and it's wrong because God has revealed to me it's wrong.
How?
Yeah, you've abdicated all moral responsibility, I'm afraid,Tt. That's your problem.
We would all.
Well, that's easy.
You're wrapped up in the culture of a 2,000-year-old civilization that believed in genocide and slavery and torture.
If you believed you had access to a perfectly moral, infallible source of morality, you would rationally abdicate your moral. So I believe I have access. So I believe I have access to that.
No, you don't. Your book advocates slavery.
I believe I have
the Bible doesn't say that rape is wrong.
Given that I believe I have access to that source, it's rational for me to abdicate my subjective, flawed, imperfect reasoning agency.
No, it's irrational for you because you've had that book shown to be false to you.
You're assuming I'm speaking
honestly believes
objective to God, so it's not objective standard.
I find Very interesting.
I said God,
something
morality is subjective. To God, it's a
There's two
subjective
people speaking at
standard.
the same time.
Yeah, well, hold on.
Right.
Yeah, let's again. We're going to dial down the over talking a little bit.
Yeah.
I know so Drag's on a mobile device. Let's give Drag a chance to speak up. He hasn't had much to say. It was.
I'm trying to determine when Matt defers to this being, and he keeps describing how different, flawed, fallible beings are, and this hypothetical deity that he's deferring to. How did he come to the decision, or the conclusion rather, that this being is all it says that it is? How would he, with his flawed, with his fallible senses, come to a determination that this thing is perfect and should be deferred to?
Hold on a second before you answer that. Yeah, it is a good point. I find it interesting that actually there were two people who referred to an infallible being, and Brenda refers to a hypothetical, perfectly rational being that is not behind the veil of ignorance, or is behind whichever it worked. But a hypothetical one that we would sort of strive towards trying to access the judgment of such a hypothetical being. And then Matt refers to an infallible, sorry, not hypothetical, but unproven being, and then can't really demonstrate the access to it. Although before he answers, I want to clarify. I don't want to sort of derail into a hangout then that is about, well, Matt now has to prove God. His argument about morality isn't valid because he can't prove God. I think we can agree that that's a point in dispute.
Yeah, that wasn't the point that I was trying to make. Just how does he come to that decision, that determination, when he's consistently made this demarcation between fallible humans and infallible beings?
Matt, do you accept you're a fallible human being, and therefore you cannot know for certain that you've got access to a perfect human being, and a perfect being? Therefore, you must accept that you could be wrong.
Of course, I could be wrong.
Sort of like your criticism of me, Matt.
Yeah, of course I could be wrong. I'm not making claim that I'm not making claim to have any access to a perfectly rational agent like Brenda is. But the answer to my question is twofold. First of all, I have properly basic beliefs. I have moral experience. And third of all, I have evidence that's persuaded me that this being exists. This God exists.
Okay.
I'm fully persuaded this God exists.
Hold on, let's not pounce on that. I do want to clarify. I don't think Brenda said that she has access to the perfectly rational being.
No,
I think she was saying
that. If you don't have access to it, then it's pointless postulating it.
Well, it's
access to rationality, and that we approach asymptotically what is objective moral.
Yeah, she described a person. It's the same way that when I talk about evidence-based policy and practice, that doesn't mean you're always going to be right about it. It's sort of a banner statement that sets out a process by which you'd access those things. But why don't we return now to, because Matt's brought it up a couple of times. Before we even argue with him about it, can you explain, at least in part for my benefit, what were you talking about when you talked about the properly basic something nature of, etc.? What was that about?
Well, you accept that properly basic beliefs don't require a justification.
Yes, I do accept that. But I'm literally, I don't understand.
Wait a minute. Well, let me just follow through on the line of reasoning then. So if you accept that properly basic beliefs don't require justification, and Moore's open question is about giving justifications, then if you held to moral facts, or if you held that morality was properly basic and those don't require justifications, then any question that asks for justification would be irrelevant, right?
Now what you need to do is demonstrate that your moral knowledge is a properly basic belief.
But let's just
exactly. It's a
yes,
way of
I completely agree. I completely agree, Matt. You're right. Now demonstrate your moral basis.
So then we go to Hogtie's other favorite thing, which is the use of analogy. And I'll use the analogy of our sense experience to physical reality, which none of us can verify, none of us can justify. It's always possible that our senses are not accurately representing physical reality. We take that as properly basic, and based on that, we then make claims that we say are objective, like the shape of the earth. So that's based on our sensory experience. So the analogy is from sensory experience to moral experience. We have sensory experience to physical reality. Most of us take that to be good enough for a properly basic belief to that. We have moral experience. We can't prove and demonstrate that moral experience is to a realm of moral facts. That's not possible. But we can take it as properly basic. We can say, okay, I I and most every other human being, in fact, has these moral experiences, that some things are definitely wrong and other things are definitely good. We'll just take that as properly basic and we'll go with that. If that was the case, anyone taking that position that morality is properly basic, Moore's question would not apply, because properly basic beliefs require no inferential justification.
Yeah, I find Moore's open question to be kind of related to the Munchausen trilemma, right? Where you simply have to admit at some stage that your foundation is this, right? Yeah. It's either this fact which I just take unjustified, or it's this bit of circular reasoning where it's a set of facts that justify each other, or that there's just this infinite regress that presumably leads to, who knows, well, to infinity. And I'm okay with that, and saying that's the way moral reasoning goes, because it'd be like if you're playing chess with somebody and then, you know, you make a bad move, you end up, you know, on your third move, you move the queen out to be right against your opponent's pawns row, and they say, well, why would you do that? That's a bad move. Well, what they mean is that's a bad move in the context of you want to play a good game of chess, and that you're trying to win the game of chess. But they say, well, why do I want to play a good game of chess? I actually want to go watch the football game right now, and this game of chess is actually annoying me, so I'm going to intentionally lose. Like, so you have a different set of goals. But at some point, there's just a foundation that is itself not justified. So I think I accept your point, Matt, that there's something properly basic about morality. So Helena, yeah.
If I'm understanding this epistemic foundationalism idea, it's that when you get down to these properly basic beliefs, it's not really that they're not justified, it's that they are justified non-inferentially, usually by senses, for example, or a claim that they're self-evident or something. So if I'm understanding Matt, are you saying that you want to call these moral beliefs properly basic? It seems to me to imply that maybe you're saying that there is a sense, a moral sense in us. Is that what you're trying to say? So that it can be non-inferentially justified by appealing to a sense, moral very much experience. Like vision or something, which is it's a moral sense.
Yeah. So instead of making appeal to sensory experience, you're making appeal to moral experience. You're making appeal to experience on both, but to different areas. To different areas. One is to physical reality, sense experience to physical reality. The other is from moral experience to moral reality.
So I would really like to very much, it'd be great if I could buy into that. The thing is, for me, we have, scientific evidence, quote unquote, for our senses, like vision and proprioception and those kinds of senses. But there isn't anything similar to that with respect to any kind of moral sense.
But that's because science doesn't deal with the field of morality. It's outside of the field of science to give us that kind of, although some would claim it's not, like Sam Harris, who thinks that morals are within the field of scientific, and there is scientific evidence on Sam Harris's view about moral sense. But I don't think anyone would deny we have moral experience.
I think you have to have. I think you actually have to.
Would anyone deny that we have, if we see something, or if something happens, that we have a sense of whether it's right or wrong?
I'd like to just address that very quickly, Jake.
I'd like to address it too, but go ahead.
Mine's quick. I think to have a moral experience, you have to have empathy. I think if you lack empathy, it kind of denies you that moral experience. Is why we can see, an evidential role in things like people with chemical brain imbalances or sociopathy.
Can you provide evidence that we need empathy to have moral experience?
Yeah, I would disagree with that as well. But
I'm making
Jake
it an inference. Yeah, I'm making it as an inference.
I'm asking you to provide evidence.
What I'm saying is there is a potential correlation between where we see the lack of that empathy, you see the lack of that moral, that ability to make a moral evaluation based on the suffering that you can cause another.
Yeah. Correlation is not equal to causation, and you haven't provided any evidence that moral experience is foundational to moral experience is empathy.
I didn't say it was foundational. I said I think it's one of the requirements to be able to have it.
But give us the evidence for that then.
Well,
where you see sociopaths.
For what? Sociopaths. So it means sociopaths, although they might have no remorse or feelings or empathy towards other human beings, That doesn't follow they don't have any empathy towards other creatures like animals and such like.
Well, no,
So
even if you picture one,
even
if you picture somebody who just simply doesn't have any empathy circuitry at all, that doesn't mean that they're immune to moral experience. They still have to they still have to engage in moral reasoning. So I kind of object to the whole brain state.
Yes, can I just jump in here? You can have someone like Donald Trump who regards what's right or wrong as simply as to whether or not it's their benefit. So Matt's argument, who's sneaking in as a foundational belief of some moral experience, is utter drivel. Donald Trump believes what's right or wrong is what is good for him. So the idea that there's some fundamental, foundational moral experience is somehow justification for its existence, absolutely ridiculous.
Okay, so is this your line of reasoning then? Your line of reasoning is because you can point to a counter-example, that negates my point. So if that was the case, then if I can point...
just an assertion.
Wait a minute. If I can then point to counter-examples to people who believe in physical reality through sensory experience, then that negates it, makes it nonsense and ridiculous. Physical reality is nonsense and ridiculous because there are people who don't hold...
I only need to find one exception. I only need to find one exception to your rule to invalidate it.
You're just over-talking. So I'm asking you to explain your reason.
You're speaking much more than anybody else. The point is, I only need to find one exception from your rule, and to find that your foundational belief is invalid, and you're just asserting that these moral experiences exist out of nowhere. You've just asserted they exist with no justification whatsoever, and they're not necessary. Whereas to work with, hold on, let me just finish a sentence. But whereas things like we have no option but to decide on some foundational beliefs, like our sensory experiences are correct, because otherwise we can't then function. That's a necessary requirement. We don't have that. There is no necessity for what you're suggesting. Therefore, we can reject it.
Okay, so you're saying then that you're saying there aren't any people who reject our senses are veridical to external physical reality.
Not with any. I think that would.
Yeah. What about transcendental? What about transcendental idealists? What about anti-realists? What about those people who don't feel the necessity?
Several people who aren't the person you're talking to and what they're arguing.
I'm giving counter examples.
I mean, Matt's got a sort of point here. Matt's got a sort of point here, though. Okay, they might not regard as a necessity for believing that your sensory experiences are correct. I suppose you're right in saying that. But I think most sort of rational people, I mean, this is all subjective, unfortunately.
Okay. So are you now saying when you just said
your subjective position is that you've inserted the moral facts as an assertion, just because you've decided it's a subjective decision.
Wait a minute. Let's clear this up. You just said most rational people. Are you now putting into the category of not rational, transcendental idealists, anti-realists?
Possibly.
Okay. So your response to the arguments from transcendental idealism and anti-realism is an ad hom, is to attack them as irrational rather than provide evidence or arguments that they're mistaken in their view.
I like that. I like that so much. I like that so much. I'm going to interrupt the discussion at this point. I know everybody's going to feel unsatisfied here. Like, oh, we're so close to solving this. But I got to warn you ahead of, like I said at the beginning, this is not going to be solved in this hangout. So remember, I'm always a bigger fan of bringing either a whole hangout or even just a portion of the hangout to a close, even though it's unresolved, because we know it's not going to be resolved. I do want to bring in another voice into this, and I know because he's not going to show up. Let's give the audience what they want. Let's give us the 90 seconds of True Empiricism providing his justification. I see Skylar's left us. I did want Skylar to justify his choice to dishonestly edit. Once again, Skylar Fiction has been accused of dishonestly editing a video clip. But he's not here to defend himself on that, so I don't know if we should. What Skylar Fiction did for his video yesterday was he took the entirety of the conversation from between Skylar and True Empiricism, and he played that through in his, he made a video where he took the entire conversation with nothing removed, nothing put in a different order, but instead inserted his own comments, often using the Max Headroom character in a computerized voice. This is what True Empiricism considers dishonestly editing. And then he suggested that the right thing that Skylar Fiction should have done was to mirror the entire video to his channel, which shows that True Empiricism
He's fucking stupid.
nothing.
But wait a minute. I mean, but can I just comment on that? It is possible. It is possible to, but by doing that format, it is possible to misrepresent someone. So if you're playing their video, depending on where you interject with your comments, that can break up the context of what they're saying. And by the time you get finished saying, then you start it again, even though you've not taken anything out, you can still be guilty of dishonest editing if your interjection is mid-sentence or mid-paragraph or mid-thought, and the interruption disturbs that to make the person seem to say one thing when they actually go on to say another thing.
Yes,
Your editing.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there is. I agree with you on that. That's the potential. People should watch for that kind of thing. I think there is one thing that Skylar Fiction needs to be a little more mindful of, and that's the accusation of poisoning the well. There is a moment in this actual video where he stops, and I don't think he interrupts Ronnie mid-sentence. That typically doesn't happen. But there is a point where he says, where Ronnie starts to answer a question, and then Skylar Fiction interjects, okay, now Ronnie just babbles for the next little while. You're just a bunch of gibberish. And that's a fairly, someone can point out, well, that's poisoning the well. I think that's something that Skylar has to be mindful of, and I agree with you on that, Matt, that he tends to do that. But as far as calling it dishonest editing, I mean, and those evangelicals on here will say that Skylar cuts up these clips, you know, and makes people say things that they're not.
Is it possible to poison a well that is made entirely of poison?
Well, that's the other side of it. So I mean, we can sort of.
I have a couple questions, if I could have, about that.
Sure. Which part? The
well, about the Skylar's videos. I mean, if you have a completely subjective morality, it's just your opinion. On what grounds do you have to criticize anybody else, including True Empiricism?
Well, he's been asked that question before. I think his answer, it's too bad that he left for this part of it, because I think his answer in the past has been, well, I mean, everyone has a right to an opinion, right? I mean, when he says, well, in my opinion, it's wrong when people, you know, rape babies for fun or whatever his term is.
Yeah, but that's
in
just
my
an
subjective opinion, it's wrong when people dishonestly edit videos, and in my subjective opinion, well, then you have your opinion.
That's just an opinion, though.
Yeah, and according to, well, I don't know why people say,
why should I care? Why should I care?
Yeah, well, you would have to say that. Okay, well, here's the thing, though. Why is the phrase just an opinion? Because as soon as you say something is an opinion, it's an opinion.
Because it is just an opinion.
Well, an opinion is what an opinion is, right? It's something that is you know, formed by whatever process. Sometimes it's a well-informed, well-thought-out opinion. Sometimes it's junk. It's just something that somebody, you know, pulled out of their ass or whatever else. But there's something about this expression, just an opinion, which means it is something that ought to be ignored. As soon as it's labeled just an opinion.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, well, that's your opinion.
No, it's not.
It's not.
No,
that's not. It's not your opinion.
It's not my opinion. It's not my opinion.
More valid point
that opinions.
You're rapidly discovering the futility of it.
Now, what you
I think the more valid point.
I think that kind of epistemic relativism is really poisonous. I don't believe in it.
I think the more valid point is if anyone holds to the view that my morality is purely subjective, so I think this is wrong and I think this is right, etc. If someone else comes along who has the completely opposite subjective moral opinion, then the first person cannot say, well, your opinion is invalid for you.
I agree.
Because that's been made on the same basis, so they have to accept that there's no fact of the matter, and both opinions are equally valid in reality, but just held by different entities in reality.
Yeah, I agree.
Well,
there is one slight difference. Can I make just one quick point? There is one slight difference there, that you can subjectively decide on universals. So, for instance, quite often when you talk about subjectivity, you're saying you've got some special.
Let
me just finish. You could say that I've got special status. For instance, I'm allowed to murder people where other people aren't. Whereas if you came up with your subjective system, could apply universal objective rules so that I'm not allowed to murder people and neither are you, that has, I think, a greater validity than someone saying, I've got my morality is that I can do anything, and someone else's morality is that they can do anything. So I think there's a difference. You can come up with some better subjective rules that have objective traits to them.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you how I think this argument often plays out when we
total
talk
nonsense.
about principles. Well, it's your opinion.
What?
No, it's not my opinion. It's not my opinion. It's not my opinion that it's not.
What's total nonsense?
It's objectively the case that it's nonsense.
Well, let me tell you where I think that sometimes we talk about.
Come on.
What I said.
She disagrees. She disagrees. It's fine. I'll tell you where I think that the conversation sometimes is productive and often isn't. And then we got to give the audience what they want. We're gonna play 90 seconds of Ronnie, and then we'll laugh and say why it's wrong. Or you're free to agree. I know Rumpus always likes to take a side. Anyway, so here's the thing. So let's say we get into an actual practical real world discussion about something that where there's different opinions on. So for example, like abortion access, right? So in your community, state, country, whatever, there's a discussion about should it be legal at all? And then, okay, well, if it's going to be legal, to what extent? Under what circumstances can abortion be performed? What conditions? What are the things that need to be in place before you do an abortion? There's where do you draw the line issue? There's lots of questions going around that. And I may have a different opinion than somebody. They say, well, that's just your opinion. Well, it's not merely my opinion. It's a conclusion I've come to based on reasoning, and based on reasoning that has led to different conclusions over the years as new evidence has come to my attention. So I can lay out what my position on this is, and then you might disagree and say, well, no, you're drawing that line in the wrong place. You may even make the point that it should just never, ever, 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 never be legal. And then if we say, okay, well, how are we going to resolve this issue? We want to decide which is a better society, which is a more moral society. Well, on what criterion are we basing which is a better, more moral society? Well, if my criterion is harms and benefits to sentient creatures, and you agree to say, well, that's a great way to, let's decide based on harms and benefits to sentient creatures. Well, now it's on. Now we've got a good discussion because we agree on the goals. We agree on the central definition of what is good and what is bad, and what a just society would do and what a just society certainly would not do. So now we have to get the facts together and lay out our reasoning from those facts, decide where we agree on those facts being actual facts or something isn't proven, right? And we've got an evidence-based policy and practice type of a reasoning to lead towards the proper conclusion. And we have to roll up our sleeves and figure out why we've come to different conclusions when our goals are the same. In contrast, think about a set of circumstances where I want to define good and bad in terms of harms and benefits to sentient creatures. But I'm having a conversation with somebody who has a different opinion about abortion incidentally to the fact that they have a different opinion overall about what's right and wrong. If I'm talking to an evangelical who says, well, right and wrong is defined by what's consistent with God's nature as revealed to us. Well, what the hell are we talking about now? Because that person can make arguments reasoning from their definition of right and wrong to their conclusion about morality of abortion access, and I can make arguments from my definition of right and wrong to my conclusions about abortion access, and it means nothing. My whole reasoning process means nothing to the other person, and their whole reasoning process means nothing to me. And I think I see a lot of that go on in this conversation where people just, they don't even agree on what they're reasoning to or from.
Yeah, but
so
isn't this the point?
Let me respond to that, and then I'll play the clip from Ronnie. Go ahead.
I mean, fundamentally, you've got a foundation. You've got a foundational belief, just like Matt has, that one of your foundational beliefs is that there is a moral sort of right and wrong, and it's based upon that principle. But as I said before, at the very start of this thing, that's a principle that you have to presume. And so you're reiterating the point that I made, about half an hour ago. It seems to me that unless you do agree on that, but you can't. There's no justification for that. And as Matt actually agreed, you can't justify that thing unless you do what Matt's done and say it's a foundational belief and therefore requires no justification.
Foundational beliefs have justifications. They just don't have other beliefs as their justification.
Right.
Jake, Matt, then Druss.
You says, no, go ahead.
Hold on. It's before, when you kind of poison the word subjective, similar to just an opinion, you said this person's subjective belief over another person's subjective belief. Well, we can go beyond that and look at what are the factors that influence someone's subjectivity. If they come from a war-torn country that has no food, we can imagine their subjectivity might be different than someone who comes from a rich, prosperous nation. So what do they get out of that kind of justification? Well, we behave this way from the revealed word of God, and there's nothing more than that. I can't imagine that that influences strong cooperative behavior. If we go to your society, like say a Middle Eastern society that is ruled by Islamic indoctrination, we can see right away that influencing that kind of morality has a garbage out kind of outcome, has a very shitty result. So you can see that having morality that's rigid, that has no justification, has a very poor outcome. And having a fluid morality that evolves based on situations, that is thoroughly designed about the nature of people's subjectivity, and that being good, it has an entirely different outcome. Now, go ahead and respond to all my babbling.
Yeah, there was far many too controversial assumptions contained in that assertion to even bother engaging with.
Absolutely. Far too.
I'll be happy to destroy. I'll be happy to engage with that in the debate if you ever get the balls to go into the debate. But to address Hogtie's point, the problem you have with you're not ever going to even get. Let's say we both agreed on your definition. How did you define morality?
It's something to do with harms and benefits in sentient creatures. That
so
one.
Let's say we both agreed on that, but let's say we then say, well, what do you mean by harms, and what do I mean by harms? And we don't mean the same thing by harms. We've got agreed definition, but we don't have agreed terminology. So, and what do we come down to? What do we come down to is your harms and benefits. When you say harms and benefits, you mean on your atheistic worldview. When I say harms and benefits, I mean on my theistic worldview. And that completely changes the picture, because your atheistic harms and benefit doesn't include spiritual harm, whereas my harms and benefits would include spiritual harm. And so you would have to resolve the great debate before you could even talk about an agreed upon definition.
Yeah, good point. Although I would also have the same problems with other atheists, like Saka, who's come out is even stronger anti-abortion than I am, and then other atheists like those crazy chicks that came on the Magic Sandwich Show 4 years ago that were actually, they called themselves pro-abortionists. So any two people you're gonna have that problem with. But your point's taken, Matt. I don't mean to dismiss it by saying that. Your point's taken. We had Druss wanted to something.
Yeah, I mean, just sort of carrying on. I think a lot of what we're talking about here, when I have a real problem with kind of like an objective standard or an objective morality, because I don't think the world works quite as simply as that. I think there's an agreed upon mesh of cooperation. And whilst, if I look at my morality and your morality, Hogtie, we're going to find that there is always going to be a certain level of meshing between our worldviews on what we believe is right and wrong. And as we see more and more people added to that mesh, you'll see that certain portions of it will generally overlap. That is kind of like the basis of where I think we get morality from as a society.
Society does that.
That's it.
It's a collective. Well, let's hear what Ronnie has to say about what was this thing about so let's call it the historical argument. So I've got to do this. You guys feel free to, you want to mute your microphones again so that we don't get the echo through. Type in the side chat if you think volume adjustments are would be beneficial. So
can I get some vodka, please? Can I have
something he doesn't like about it.
Sorry, I heard Dreg. What was that, Dreg?
Can I get some vodka before you play this?
Oh, vodka. Okay, here we go.
Someone else's moral values, and simply saying his moral values are better.
No, sir. You're not able to process anything that's being told to you. The point being is that those atrocities that happen under a subjective framework are outside of the norm. You need to understand that. It's not that I don't like it. I'm not talking about what I like or don't like. I'm pointing out that historic evidence in the past where we see these subjective standards that you're talking about, they do not exist in any moral framework, or when they do pop up, they are outside of the norm. So when you look at it, if you were to take a graph and you were to see, okay, these subjective frameworks that you're claiming is what all these people hold to, they don't exist other than in a few places by people that have these godless frameworks. You're removing God, you see this particular position where you see this spike of events that take place that don't tend to happen in the norm and reality by moral agents, which are human beings. That is the point here. So it's not something difficult to understand. Nobody is sitting over here and saying that, well, I don't like these morals. That's a straw man by the very definition of the straw man fallacy. A straw man fallacy is when you attack another argument rather than the argument that's being presented to you. No one's saying, well, I don't like the fact that these atrocities happen. The point is that when you see these atrocities happen and you look at the timeline of mankind over the last 2,000 years, regardless of belief systems, Islam, Christianity, or any other belief system, there seems to be consistency all the way across the board where people know not to act this way or to take these things this far. But when you put atheists in this particular position, or people in a position to where they don't have this moral framework, well, what is the argument here? The argument is trying to argue for a God. You're removing God. You're removing God from the picture. Then you see these upsurges, which seems to imply that this when you remove God from the I'm sorry guys, I'm getting a distraction over here from my tablet. Something's trying to.
And et cetera, et cetera. So he starts having some audio problems, and we can pick up on that a bit later. So yeah, to recap, he's saying it would be a straw man. He says nobody is saying that these atrocities are bad things. Which I think people are saying that atrocities are bad things. I think that's sort of what the word actually means.
What the fuck did I just listen to?
No, Craig.
Like literally, what the fuck was that?
I don't even.
The worst thing is you can actually hold on. The whole thing.
Recap it. Yeah. So he says, that nobody's saying those atrocities are bad, but then he says, but you notice that these atrocities, which no one is saying they're bad things, but you notice that with the Christians, it never happens with Christians. Apparently, with Islam, it never happens that bad things happen under Islam. But when atheists come in, then these bad things happen. But not that I'm saying that they're bad things. That would be a straw man to say I'm saying they're bad things. But it only happens with atheists, never with Christians, and never with Islam. It's really only when the atheists do it. And it's something about taking God out of the equation and then crackle, wait, I'm distracted by my pad. I searched for the best presentation of what I'm calling the historical argument, the historical moral argument. That was the best segment I could find. Druss buzzed in first.
Oh, please. I can, again, I'm going to keep this short and snappy. I mean, what he basically said is without God, it's bad, but with my moral God, it's not quite as bad.
Yeah. Atrocities with God are fine. I mean,
he said it doesn't happen.
No, he actually did say, well, bad things do happen, but they're worse when you have this atheistic sort of.
He does make a count that the body count is higher under Pol Pot and Stalin.
Come on, Stalin, Pol Pot, and a couple of others, they were real outliers in anybody's standard.
Don't ever go to Sweden or Iceland either, because those countries are pretty much entirely atheist. And they'll kill you on the street.
But the key thing about that,
I've been to Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Iceland.
The key thing is, of course, in the modern world where we've managed to reject much of religious thing, we have an industrial ability to be able to kill people. So naturally, in this world where we've developed more, we'll be able to kill more people in wars. But the other marvelous thing about true empiricism is that whenever you listen to him, you suddenly feel as though your IQ, you suddenly realize how much more intelligent you are than he is. He definitely gives a boost in some ways. You worry about the IQ, he's draining away your IQ, but you definitely feel elevated in the fact that, God, yes, there are people much more stupid than I am.
Yeah, lots of people in the world.
Every time I listen to you, Rumpus, I feel the exact same way.
Relatively easily.
Yeah, but that's because you're an idiot, Matt, and you don't understand. You didn't understand the.
People can evaluate based on
Yeah, three people
what I
watch,
said, what I
on
can
the
think of I can think of a charitable interpretation of what TE just said. You guys are kind of joking around a little bit, but it's not hard to think of a charitable interpretation.
Give it a go.
He's saying, look, in history there are these outliers. Nobody's saying that there's a preference issue going on here. I'm not talking about preference. I never said I was talking about preference, but let's look at history. There are these outliers, and we all agree they're outliers of these atrocities and these atrocious behaviors. And from my point of view, when you look at it, when the outliers reach the magnitude of this level, it's always atheism behind it. That's what he said.
Yeah, no, and I characterized it that way, especially at the opening when we first started here. That's the way I characterized it. I mean, I don't think he's actually making the claim that such things never happen, or even lower level bad things happen under Christianity or Islam. But he's saying that these spikes happen only under atheism, and he's wrong about that, and that they're worse under atheism, and he's wrong about that. And second, it doesn't at all speak to the issue of whether or not there exists an objective morality or subjective morality. What he's saying, even if we accept his incorrect facts about how that it's these atheist regimes that cause these grand deaths. I mean, as Rumpus points out, there are a lot more people in the world to kill and a lot fancier, more efficient ways of killing them. But it's not connected to these principles of atheism, but whatever. Even if you say, well, yeah, these things do tend to spike under these atheist regimes, all you're saying then is that different cultures come to different moral conclusions, and that when there are some theistic cultures that didn't engage in atrocities, and there are some atheistic cultures that did engage in atrocities. Again, we'll sort of grant that that's true, even though again he's misrepresenting it. Right. But then, so what? All that means, that doesn't say that there exists morality. What you're showing is that there are cultural differences. That there are people who apply their moral reasoning and they come to different conclusions. Therefore, morality is objective. All he's saying is people who believe. One sentence. He's saying that people who believe in objective morality tend not to engage in atrocities, and people who believe in subjective morality tend to more likely to engage in atrocities. And he uses as a proxy for whether you believe in subjective or objective morality, atheism. Yeah. When in any room full of Christians and atheists, you're going to have a mixture, or any theists and atheists, you're going to have a mixture of different people saying, yeah, it's objective, no, it's subjective, and it's going to go back and forth. But he's just pitching this narrative that it's atheists who are the ones who believe in subjective morality, and hey, happen to notice some graph I'm imagining in my head where these spikes tend to happen under atheism, which he's wrong about. Sorry,
well, the communists did believe in an objective basis for morality. There was a
dialectical materialism.
Yeah.
And most theists are believing objective morality, where it seems to me, in my experience, most non-theist atheists hold to subjective morality. Not all, but most.
No, most atheists, although I could say everything is ultimately subjective, they do abide by the principles that we started off with Hogtie talking about, maximizing well-being and minimizing suffering. Most atheists hold that, and they hold that so that they don't have a higher obligation to something else. That's the obligation they have to their fellow man, whereas you've got this obligation to conform to the morality that endorses torture, slavery, mass murdering people, and genocide, Noah's flood, etc., etc. That's the sort of morality you engage with. Well, we don't have that. Hold on, I'm finished. We don't have that baggage. We actually can just work on the principle, okay, we're just concerned about the well-being of our fellow man and work with that. And hence, the moral standards, the secular morality that we've got in society, the best bits of it have all been drawn from the secular principles and not from religious ones.
Yeah. Okay, let me respond to that nonsense, because what you referenced there is called utilitarianism. Under utilitarianism, anyone holding to real utilitarianism, if slavery was going to maximize the happiness for the maximum number of people, it would be the moral thing to do under that secular system. the same as rape,
you're straw manning me.
child
I don't
abuse,
set up
anything
utility.
else.
Well, and regardless, we're also going back to unresolved issues anyway. I want to announce we're actually got 9 minutes left. I'm going to pull the plug on it again. We're not going to get to the bottom of this. Has anybody changed their mind during? Part of the reason I'm announcing the 10-minute thing is if somebody else wants to start a hangout, please message to me. That you want to host a hangout so that I can announce for people to go look for your hangout on your channel. And if you can get it set up quickly enough, we'll even reshare the link through the live feed on this with the live chat on this one. And other people might want to bridge their way over there. But has anybody changed their mind even slightly on any issue that we've discussed on the issue about subjectivity, objectivity, there being subjective components and objective components? Anyone?
I think that Matt's criticism of my position was something that I need to look into. It is not trivial, and I need to look into it more and think about it more and research it more.
I think that my position on morality is ever evolving, and I think I'm open to any and all criticism. But I think Matt's position is just fucking lazy, to be quite honest with you. I can always defer to Big Daddy and say that, well, whatever Big Daddy says is moral and not moral. That doesn't require any thought. It just requires being a supplicant.
Can I respond to that, Hogtie?
Yeah, certainly. One second. You didn't change your position in terms of whether or not you can.
It'd be really funny, Matt.
You didn't change your position on whether or not you can have a vibrating mobile device in a hangout. Rumpus did on 2 occasions. At one point, he said, "You have a good point there, Matt." And then at one other point, he said, "Okay, you're right about that." I don't think Rumpus was conceding any really big points to Matt, but I did hear a couple of, "Okay, yeah, I've got some stuff to think about." So that's both Brenda and Rumpus conceding a little bit that they need to think about some stuff Matt's saying.
It depends
Dragnet's saying he's full of shit, but
it depends on the hangout if vibrators are included.
Just on the point of it being lazy thinking, the one thing it's not is indicative of lazy thinking. And in fact, if Dragnot could present any positive arguments for his atheism if he's an atheist, or his non-theism if he's a non-theism, as much lines of evidence supported by arguments and evidence that I can support for my theism, because my morality and my stance on morality is derived from my evaluation. You're just over talking again like an ignorant dick that you are.
Yeah, I'm doing it with you all the time. Get on with it.
Yes, we have limited time, Matt.
I think my point. I think his interruptions speak more for what I was trying to say than any.
I think we all disagree.
So you interrupt more than anybody else, Matt.
I think people will take the point just from the fact he had to interrupt me.
Yeah, well, whatever. It's got to be sort of the personal, jocular, insulting, that sort of thing. I don't know if I mean, if Drag wants to say that your position is full of poop, my kids are back in the room. I agree with them in part. Lazy, no, definitely not. I don't think Scotsman's Matt's position is lazy. I don't think anyone would make that.
Oh, I think it is. This random assertion has got a foundational. I think that's incredibly lazy. Can't justify it. 6 minutes. Just
asserts it. I wrap things up there, Rumpus.
Yeah, I know, 6 minutes. Has anybody changed their opinion on anything, or do you feel that?
Helena,
what do you got?
I'm still dealing with moral theories. After this hangout, I guess I don't want to discount the possibility that there is an objective morality somehow. I could work it out that way. So I'm a little bit more open to that option.
Well, I hope you again, I'm going to throw out my shoulder here, patting myself on the back, but I hope you listened to the part where I was talking about the amusement park ride operator who has to make a very simple one-dimensional assessment, and how there's sort of 3 elements going into that. And I hope that maybe that will open your mind to the possibility that there is such a thing as objective morality, but the actual moral reasoning can never be wholly objective. It's crazy to think that it possibly could be.
Oh, sure. I never thought that anyway. I did like your analogy. It's a good description of how each one of us is situated in the world.
Well, thank you. Keep the praise coming. Who else has got a...
Well, I mean, that wasn't actually an analogy to objective morality. That was an analogy to subjective morality, because it started off with a subjective starting point.
And a subjective ending point too. But I was arguing that there's a possibility that your moral standards could be something that's objective, and it wouldn't matter even if it were objective. You're still going to there's still going the moral reasoning itself is subjective in its nature. So I'm not presenting it as an argument for objective morality. I'm suggesting that even if a person could argue towards that there exists an objective moral standard, we're all still a bunch of schlubs stuck in subjective moral reasoning. So there.
Which is exactly the point I started off with, the fact that we have subjective decisions and we try and generate objective rules, but we have to decide upon those subjectively.
Well, but it's not part of
you're arguing in favor
morality.
of a cult that might eat babies, so we're not listening to you now. Sorry, Helena?
I'm hoping that everybody already understands that it's not part of an objective morality kind of claim that we have to have access to it.
No, I mean objective. I mean, we're talking about the epistemology of it, us knowing and having access to it.
I just want to reiterate, it is two separate things. Like, I don't want anyone to think that if you want to hold to objective morality, you also have to hold that there's some way to know what the correct propositions are. Those two things don't go together at all. I think that that's what I was trying to hit at.
Yeah.
But if you
and that's what I have a problem with about the objective subjective thing, because it depends in the culture and where you've got your morality from and how that morality has developed. I can look back at my childhood and say, gosh, I remember reading Aesop's fables and various other things, and that helped form some of the foundations of what later on became my morality as I grew into an adult.
Okay, actually, okay, JD, you're on the hotspot here. Why are you not talking, JD? What did you do? You're not smart enough to. Yeah, you're the ones who brags about.
I'm listening.
You always brag about.
So many people are
talk anymore about morality.
I don't want people to like gang up on Matt, because usually when Matt and I talk, things get more heated than they should be, and he's already got plenty of people who's arguing with it.
You're not going to have enough time, and there's the objection. Oh, Matt's talking about other people. Matt is the only one who is representing the position from sort of his view. I have a couple of times stopped him. I've stopped Rumpus from the thing about viewing that, well, you're in a boxing match with everybody else in the room. I think Matt has stated his position with sparkling clarity, and I appreciate that. That's great. So same to you, Rumpus. But
so you just want to know what my position is? But
you're saying, yeah, I don't understand why. Okay, fine. You don't need to start on Matt. You don't need to start a fight with him. We've all done that. What are you here for?
Well, to me, morality is just a massive mess. I mean, we can't even get consensus on what we all mean when we say something is moral.
Why are we talking about
just say when someone tells you what they mean, they say, here's moral A, here's morality A. And what I mean by morality is how I can best get along with my fellow, conscious beings in this cosmos. And then someone else will come along like, oh, well, obviously that's not what I mean at all. I'm morality B. I want to do whatever God tells me to do. And so we're not even on the same page, even remotely.
It's a mess. It's a mess.
No way to bridge that gap, because we're not even right. We disagree even on what we're talking about.
As one of the most experienced moderators, I get your point. It's a mess, but as one of the most experienced moderators, I want to ask you, then why are we talking about it? Why is this a hangout topic over and over and over and over again in the great debate community? JD King.
Well, I think because we don't start off with saying, here's what I mean when I say something is moral, and you don't have to agree with it. And in some cases, there's just no way to get common ground. It's kind of hard to convince someone that their entire moral system, they should have they should mean something else than what they currently mean. It's kind of hard.
JD, you're wrong, and I'm embarrassed for you. The reason we keep talking about it is because it is one of I was going to say 3 gaps, but I'm going to say 4 gaps. Right, there are all sorts of things that we could be talking about with the evangelicals who are trying to convince it. Remember, these evangelicals aren't here to preach a gospel message. They aren't here to tell us about salvation through Christ's sacrifice for us. They aren't here to teach about repentance and about faith. They're here to give the anti-atheist message. If you're not one of us, if you don't believe as an evangelical, then you're a poo-poo head, and we're just going to say bad things about you. And when it comes down to it, how do they argue in favor of their position? By pointing out what's wrong with your position. JD Kane, tell me right now how the universe started. So you don't know. Yeah, okay, fine. Abiogenesis. Tell me how abiogenesis proved to me that it happened. Justify the laws of logic. Can you justify the laws of logic?
About that.
Stop beating on me.
I want all the atheists in the room right now. This is where we're going with this. I want all the atheists in the room right now to succinctly and coherently describe to me the foundations of the atheistic moral position. And if you don't all agree right now, I have now demonstrated atheism is wrong.
You can suck my dick.
That's
and
why.
We can just call it that.
That's why.
Oh, ad hominem. Ad hominem.
Yeah. Believe it or not, the reason we keep talking about morality, I wanted to end on this point. If somebody wants to throw in something on that real quick, but I kind of want this to be the bow on the whole thing. This is why we keep talking about it, and why we keep talking about it with idiots, is because they keep bringing it up as morality. You guys can't explain the start of the universe. You can't explain the laws of logic. You can't explain where life came from. And you can't explain your moral reasoning coherently because the shit's complicated. And that's why they keep bringing it up, and that's why we keep arguing with people who can't explain it themselves, because it is their God of the gaps argument.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not a God of the gaps argument. That's abductive arguments from the best explanation. It's against the best explanation, theism or atheism. And if you can present arguments, and theism can give account for A to Z, and atheism cannot give accounts for A to Z.
I noticed Max is in here, so I'll just go, shut the fuck up, man!
Then theism would be the best explanation for reality. Even if it was the reverse, then atheism would be the best. That's just abductive arguments.
I didn't know abductive arguments were supernatural.
So now I have my soundbite of atheism is the best from Matt.
Morality is just a product of society, and we have a multitude of societies throughout history, and therefore we have a multitude of morality systems, and therefore there is no basis to it. There's nothing objective about it. It's just that's why we have arguments about it. No, it's a great argument. Throughout history, there'll be moral systems, and therefore, and they've got their own particular one, these religious thing, and they say, oh look, there's all this moral divergence, and this is it's a cultural phenomenon.
So keep in mind to conclude that objective morality doesn't exist.
So there are many cultural differences about the shape of the earth and whether evolution happened. That means there's no fact of man.
We're not going back to it. We're not going back to that. Again, so we're actually past when I wanted to end it. I was hoping that
if you think that morality is the same as the shape of the earth, you're an idiot.
Tell that to a transcendental idealist.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to wrap up on this point. I was hoping somebody would post news that they wanted to host a hangout. No one has. So the audience is going to be free to wander. I understand. Bring It Evolutionists is on. I guess they've got about.
You mean if somebody had posted a hangout, I wouldn't be free to wander?
You're constrained.
Well, that's your opinion, Brenda.
Well, whatever. It's going to go. It's going to go on forever. You guys are welcome to hang out here too and to talk about morality and pick Matt's brain for. By the way, I do want to say about the argument from ignorance, Matt. If it's your view that I was saying that the Christians are arguing from ignorance, I know there's a rich history of Christian thinking into the issue of morality. I cannot actually even think of an organization or a structure or a group of people who've put as much thought into moral reasoning. And I mean in terms of the depth and the breadth and the number of years that have gone into it as the Christian enterprise. But you got a head start, that's why. But that's not who I was talking about. When I talk about the argument from ignorance and why do we keep talking about it in this nutty little corner of the internet, it's that particular group that keeps going to us. Oh, you can't explain abiogenesis. Oh, you can't explain where the laws of logic came from. So I hope you didn't take that as pointed in your direction, because like I said, I don't think your thinking on it has been lazy, but it's your self-professing brothers in Christ who I was pointing that at.
I'd like people to focus on people other than, the people they have been. I mean, true empiricism doesn't seem to me to have anything interesting to say.
That man's a genius.
And other than being a lol's cow, I don't see any point in talking to him or to Antonio or to some of the others. Can we get fresh blood?
Yeah, I absolutely agreed. And I want to hang out on that. I do want to note though that I think what's the running time on this so far? We've been 2.5 hours, and 98.6% of it has been on the issues itself, on people vigorously getting on the mic and arguing with each other and agreeing with each other and saying, hey, good point, saying, no, you're stupid, you're full of crap, all about the issues itself. We took a little break at the beginning, a little break towards the end, and then this last little bit here to talk about, isn't it funny that those guys are over there talking to themselves? And that's the way it should be. I think that we can engage each other, we can have these kind of conversations and stay on the topics and kind of engage with each other on the issues. And you say, well, they're not interesting. They're interesting in the sense that they're amusing. I hope you'd agree with that, friend of it. Okay. Well, all right. So thanks to the audience. Thanks to you guys for showing up. This was really, really fun. I had a lot of fun with sort of telling you guys, oh, you're wrong about this and whatever. Just really good energy today. So spread the hangout around, whatever. I don't have a good catchphrase on how to end a hangout. So
use JD's. Fuck you.
I don't. Well, my kids are back in the room, so I don't know.
Okay.
It's hog tie goodbye.
Scotsman Matt, you get the last word.
Yeah,
Scotsman.
the only thing